You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
The boy and girl are making out, right? When they hear over the radio that this lunatic killer's escaped from an insane asylum.
That's not the way it goes. The boy goes for help and the girl stays in the car and she hears this like scratching sound.
No, he's been decapitated. No, he was gutted with a hook.
Last week we discussed folklore. Today we get more specific. This is what we call an urban legend. Contemporary folklore passed on as a true story. Something you might have heard about mixing Pop Rocks and soda.
Supposedly, your stomach and your intestines burst.
Voila, still alive. Mr. Brooks, please.
It's gonna explode! Somebody call 911!
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, you guys have us talking about two absolute legends that we love on this show. And so it's going to be another crazy long episode. So just join that sleaze. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, we decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and two bonus episodes every single month, which we are in our 5th or 6th year of at this point. There's like 140, almost 150 plus bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films, which there will be some discussions on the way about those soon. So if you're interested in that, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we did have some people make the jump this week, so we're going to give them their shout-outs here. We had Roswell Moon make the upgrade from $5 a month to $10 a month and is going to be joining us for the monthly virtual screenings that we try to do on the last Thursday of every month. So thanks so much to Roswell. We had Jim Alexander signed up for $5 a month. We had LP Gartner sign up for the $54 for the year. Got an entire year of the show in advance for a little bit of a reduced rate per month, which you can get. We had Stephen Pritchard sign up. We had Tyler sign up at $5. Kaser sign up. And that is it for this week. So thanks to all of you folks. Hope you guys are enjoying all of those bonus episodes. We appreciate the support.
Yeah, thank you.
The other plug for the week, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you are listening on either one of those platforms, and I see the stats, I see you right now listening on both those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. We appreciate that support as well. And the very last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you can think of. A pillow, a blanket, a hoodie, a notebook. You guys have bought all of these various things. You can, for anyone interested, that link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us, and we would have had a very special guest, Wyatt Duncan, on for the first time to talk about two very different stylistic approaches to the sad daily realities of ex-cons and the lifetime criminal mindset. We talked Ulu Grosbard's very methodical and depressing Straight Time from 1978, a starring vehicle for Dustin Hoffman, co-written by Ed Bunker, a real lifetime criminal turned crime writer, as well as Michael Mann, who did a little bit of an uncredited rewrite on that film for anyone. So if you're a big fan of like Thief, Straight Time is like, you gotta check it out. We had a great time talking about it with Wyatt, who also paired it with, on the opposite side of the spectrum, the Coen brothers, more lighthearted and absurdist, but still, empathetic view of, that kind of milieu. We talked Raising Arizona from 1987 with Nick Cage and Holly Hunter, which definitely took more of a Looney Tune approach to how those kinds of characters might behave.
Yeah, far more cynical than far less cynical rather than what we're used to from those boys, and just amazing lead performances by Hunter and Cage, just unbelievably hilarious.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard that episode, that was 2 weeks ago over on the main feed with Wyatt. Go back and check it out. But then last week over on the Patreon exclusively, you might have heard of it. There was a new film on the way called Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I think I'm not actually paying that much attention to it, but it was a great excuse as always for us, where the zeitgeist aligns with the kinds of films we like to talk about on this show. And we said, well, what a great excuse to finally go back and talk about some 80s pop blockbuster throwbacks to an earlier era of pulpy colonialist fantasy action adventure. We talked, obviously, Steven Spielberg's iconic, masterfully constructed take on the Saturday morning adventure serials of his childhood with Raiders of the Lost Ark. And instead of being incredibly boring with it, and we're like, well, what if we just do 2 Indiana Jones movies? We were like, what if we went to Spielberg's protege, Robert Zemeckis, who around the same time saw his first major success in 1984, prior to Back to the Future, with a much sillier, zanier adventure rom-com called Romancing the Stone, written by Diane Thomas and starring Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner, which was obviously greenlit due to the success of Raiders, but was actually written prior to it existing, and kind of had a little bit of a crazy story and history getting to the screen for anyone interested.
Yeah. It's long story short, it's essentially like Michael Douglas goes into a diner and meets a waitress, and she has this kind of story and screenplay prepared, and it just kind of propelled her into Hollywood for a little while. So it's a great story. The film, isn't quite Raiders of the Lost Ark, but there's still some fun to be had.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, there was a lot of fun, and it was definitely a monster episode, of course, because we were trying to fit in. We didn't want everyone yelling at us being like, how did you forget this one production history note about Raiders of the Lost Ark? So we tried to cover most of our bases last week. So again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if you're interested in that episode. That was over last week. But moving on to this week, we have a very special returning guest joining us. She is a Texas-based novelist, the author of such books as Devils on to Dust, this Western zombie horror story, and Missing Presumed Dead, which is more of this ghostly neo-noir romance. We're very excited to have her back. That guest is Emma Berquist. Emma, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. We had a blast talking with you last time, specifically because you brought on a sort of Canadian horror classic, one that we somehow, despite being a Canadian podcast, had not gotten around to. We talked Ginger Snaps, which was this really well-directed teen horror movie with actual ideas about, how to physically manifest the struggles those girls were going through at school and home and through puberty in this very fleshy horror way. And I didn't realize until kind of like after we did that episode that, you actually do have a little bit of, a young adult following, no?
I do, yeah. Well, particularly because I read a lot of horror, and it works really well using teenagers as main characters in horror. It's just such a sort of classic way of doing it that it lends itself very well to that age range.
Mm-hmm. I know. Well, and once I figured that out, and once you came with this pairing, it all kind of clicked into my head a little bit. So as it goes on, we have the guests bring the double features with them. So what films did you bring with you this week, and why did you pair them together?
Let's see. So we have Urban Legend from 1998, and we have I Know What You Did Last Summer from 1997. And I thought they'd be, a good pairing because it's, again, teenagers. I think Urban Legend is they're in college, but again, same age range. But they were basically both made directly after Scream, and sort of trying to, piggyback off the success of that to varying degrees.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be fun to sort of look at those, and they also both deal with the same urban legend, but kind of a couple different takes on it.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah, both of them have the hook, the the classic escaped lunatic with a hook for a hand stalking teenagers. But yeah, both of them are also so indebted to the like post Scream era of the teen horror slasher craze. Both of them are pretty trashy and very of their era. And it'll be interesting to talk about how obviously cynically greenlit in the wake of the box office haul of Scream that they were. I mean, with I Know What You Did Last Summer, it literally is written by Kevin Williamson, who wrote Scream, and he literally pulled it out of a drawer when they said, "You got another one? Like, we can't wait for Scream 2. Have you written literally anything else?" And so that's how we get that. Yeah,
it's actually based on a book. I Know What You Did Last Summer by Lois Duncan, who was, very prolific young adult writer. And I think it was written like in the 70s,
It was written in the 70s, yep.
Yeah. And I've actually read it. It's been a while since I've read it, but there's like a lot of changes that they made to sort of make it into a slasher. Like, it's not a slasher, the book itself. It's
very
more of like a mystery of like
cool.
who, and we can get into that when we talk about the movie, but
I'm very interested because like Williamson kind of held on to that, for a little while and turned it into a slasher, and it basically stars every teen star of the era as well.
They just shoved them all in there.
Yep. And so I had seen that one before, and it was kind of one that I had gone to because I was, such a huge fan of Scream at the time. And I was like, I got to see whatever else this guy is doing. And somehow I had never gotten around to Urban Legend.
Wow,
which is
what a treat for you.
I know. And I got to say, I kind of had a blast with it.
It's a lot of fun.
I'm excited to dive into these. So let's kick things off here. Let's start off with I Know What You Did Last Summer.
You did last summer.
All right, we are talking I Know What You Did Last Summer, the 1997 American teen slasher directed by Jim Gillespie, written by Kevin Williamson of Scream fame, as we've already mentioned, and starring a who's who of hot 90s teenage stars, including Jennifer Love Hewitt from Heartbreakers and The Tuxedo with Jackie Chan, a classic, Sarah Michelle Gellar of Bucky the Vampire Slayer fame, Ryan Philippe, Gellar's co-star for Cruel Intentions just 2 years later, and obviously the Scooby-Doo god himself, Freddie Prinze Jr., who would actually co-star in that with Gellar and later marry Gellar after meeting on this film together, which is a little bit of a cute little history there. But my first question right off the bat, this is not where we would usually start with an episode, but I just need to ask, I'm assuming both of you probably saw this in your teen years at some point.
Yep.
Which actor was the one that did it? Who was like, okay, I need to watch that? Was there one? Because for me, it was 100% Gellar. I loved Buffy. She was in Scream 2. So I came to this after it, Scream 2 had come out. And I was like, I got to see whatever this is.
I think for me, it was probably her as well, because I was a big Buffy fan. But I also thought Ryan Philippe was really cute. So that probably was this before or
That's
after
how they
Cruel
get you.
Intentions?
That's how they get you. That was the appeal of these movies in a way.
Yeah. Was it when was Cruel Intentions? Was that?
I think that was 98 or 99.
Yeah, that might have been later. But yeah, I just remember thinking he was very cute. But this might have been the first movie I'd seen him in then. But yeah, no, this was definitely one. I didn't see it in the theaters, but it was definitely one we, rented and watched at a sleepover at some point.
Yeah, was that the same for you, Jamie?
For me, I'm having a hard time remembering, because we did a brief cover of this on another podcast, and I thought that was the first time that I actually saw it all the way through. But there were definitely, as I was watching it, there were moments that I'm like, okay, I've seen this in passing on cable or something like that, 100%.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, like, growing up, I had a massive crush on Jennifer Love Hewitt and Sarah Michelle Gellar, so it was a very easy watch for me.
Yeah, and any fans of Johnny Galecki,
Oh yeah,
You get a real treat in this one too.
I always forget he's in that. Yeah.
Or if you strongly dislike him, you also get a treat, I guess.
Yeah, that's also true. But yeah, if it wasn't already obvious, I Know What You Did Last Summer was greenlit due to the smash success of Scream. Columbia Pictures was literally rushing to get a knockoff out, and they were like, do you have anything lying around that's sort of similar? And they got really lucky that at the bottom of Kevin Williamson's junk drawer somewhere, he had this script that he had already written. And, so they threw him some, anonymous Scottish director, and they said, we're kind of off to the races. And as Emma mentioned, he did loosely base it on a book from the 1970s about a hit and run, sort of like teen suspense novel by Lois Duncan that had the same central concept, an inciting incident of teens instead hitting a young boy and kind of being haunted by it a year later, and when it becomes clear that someone knows or someone witnessed them doing it, and turning it into like this creepy little morality tale. But then the studio said, that's not really what we're looking for. Could it be a slasher? Could it be kind of like Scream? Could they hit a guy and now it's Scream? And but Emma, maybe talk to us about the book a little bit and some of the what actually happens after, because at a certain point they hit this guy in the middle of the road, they bury the body, and we'll get into the specifics of that sequencing and everything like that. But it turns into a slasher pretty fast after that when the kids start getting kind of picked off one by one. So if the book is not a slasher, what is like the dramatic, sort of heft of it?
I mean, it's actually, I think, a little bit more messed up because they kill a child. Like they hit a boy riding his bike, and it's a hit and run, and they just keep going. So like right away, that's far more upsetting than hitting, like a grown man. It's like this was a child that they killed.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically kind of destroys their lives. They all have to sort of process that, and there's like some guilt that's going on, which they kind of do in the movie, where she's struggling in college because of the guilt.
It's not given the exact kind of weight you could imagine someone doing it with, like how much guilt and how haunted they actually are, because this movie is probably at its best when it is following through on that concept, and like this killer who is hanging around is just kind of this scary figure, like a ghost that is like reminding them of something awful that they've done, and that concept is strong clearly from the book. And where it kind of falters is actually sometimes trying to turn that actually into like a slasher set piece, or because I'll just say it, we'll have to mention this kind of up front. Jim Gillespie, he's not quite Wes Craven.
Right.
In terms of the craft, it's not as effective or stylish. The metatextual elements of Williamson's satire aren't really there. It's in comparison to Scream, it is pretty derivative and generic, but there's still some fun to be had with it.
Yeah, Gillespie it seems like he wanted to more focus on the mystery aspects of it, but he was forced by the studio to make it more of a slasher, because even in these notes that I was looking at on the wiki, he seemed to want to make it like not gratuitous at all. There's not a lot of gore or blood in this in comparison to a lot of slashers that you
and
would
the few there are, they had to go back and reshoot all of the stuff with John Galecki. I don't think he was even supposed to die in the original version of the movie, and he gets like the two most gruesome moments in the movie now just because they were like, well, we need to go back and reshoot something, people aren't feeling it.
And most of the violence happens like off screen. You just see the hook or something.
Yeah, and the most that you get, I think with Johnny's death, like you do get that one side profile view of the hook kind of in his his lower jaw a little bit. There's nothing that hits the angle that you would actually see it. Like it's not over the top by any means. And most of it, like if someone is getting dragged by the hook, it's usually like a bird's eye view of it, so that you can only see the body and maybe a trail of blood or something like that. There's also the one, I think this was one of the big reshoots actually, where one of the girls gets her throat slit, and there's like a blood gag that goes off onto the window, and before they weren't even going to do the blood gag. So it's not as crazy as you're used to from most slashers. And speaking to, like, I know that we do this on the show where we kind of just jump ahead and all that, but it's related to just how they approach the main story and how they readapted it. Having it be a child automatically sinks in this kind of like this deep guilt, and it's a lot harder to have them have like a redemption moment or a moment where there's clarity, and then they realize, oh, they're not actually as like, they're not it's not their fault as much as you're first thinking that it is in the beginning of the film. Whereas if it's a kid,
you can't root for people who killed a kid. Like, they can't be the heroes of the movie.
Yeah, and in this, by the end, like, you know, spoiler alert or whatever, it does kind of turn into this thing where they're like, okay, well, he was a bad guy the whole time anyway, so don't worry about it. You know? Yeah. So that gets a little bit.
At least we don't have to feel as guilty anymore.
Exactly, we can move on and just live normal lives now, or, you know, kind of.
There's definitely that quality to it, and everything about it being a slasher does feel kind of like a cheap sort of like after effect added onto it. I know that the writer was actually especially pissed about it because they were like,
well, because it's a suspense book, you know, it's about like who is messing with these people and leaving them notes, and like you know, it was, the idea was that, you know, it was like a thriller, not a like, there wasn't a lot of violence. I think one person gets shot, but like they live. You know, there weren't any it wasn't someone like stalking them and killing them. It was like trying to force them to deal with their guilt and like confess to what they've done.
Right, so there's all these like red herrings and all that, which they do, which I will say with this, they kind of play with, and that's, I think, where the most interesting aspects of the film go, where the actors just are now blaming every single other actor, and you get all of these really overly dramatic scenes with that. Like, that's where a lot of the fun is.
That stuff is great, because there is like a morality, like, obviously, the way that they do incorporate the morality tale and urban legend aspect into this, where the characters are actually getting paranoid and suffering guilt and confusion, and their actions are coming back to haunt them, stuff they've taken from the book, is, you know, it's done decently when they actually focus on it. And as Jamie said, you do kind of wish they weren't maybe as pretty cleanly absolved by the final twist that we'll get to as they are. But the basic idea of like grafting teen melodrama onto like an old school, almost like giallo-esque like murder mystery plot, where it's like kind of like this whodunit, and everyone is suspicious of the next person beside them and making choices based on that. Like, it's not a terrible idea, and, you know, these actors are kind of fun enough, and Williamson enough of a writer of cruel rich kid dialogue that you know, there is some fun to be have about, these characters hanging out in these like, you know, coastal underlit locations, freaking out about this horrible thing they're haunted by. You know, there's some nice anamorphic imagery that's kind of used throughout, and you know, Williamson's incorporation of the spooky campfire urban legend, like the hook itself, is actually, you know, contributes to, you know, some of the atmosphere of it, which is, you know, kind of the best thing that it has going for it, as well as anyone who's into it, like all the 90s fashion, puffy
wonderful
hats, and
so good.
the all the denim and thumb rings, and
gel.
You know, it's got some of that like the OC Dawson's Creek teen energy of everyone looks like an extra in like a Backstreet Boys video sometimes.
Yeah,
and you know, it's kind of charming. It's kind of like I thought the strongest stuff, weirdly enough, was kind of like the opening set piece, and I guess maybe that's because that's where the book's inciting incident is so well realized, when you have and obviously updated for the 90s, where you have like this fucking
music,
you know, you have the Rock flying over the coastal waves, and you know, this ominous vibe of the fisherman looking dude named David Egan, who's, you know, drinking and holding a pendant over the edge of a cliff of this, you know, this quaint fishing village or whatever. And we later find out, you know, it's because his girlfriend or fiance was killed in an accident there, and it was maybe his fault, and maybe he's suicidal about it or anything. But you have that vibe mixed in with the fireworks going on in the background, and Michelle Gellar, the croaker queen at the beauty pageant named Helen Shivers, who is about to win, and using her great line, "I'm gonna serve my country through art."
Hell yeah!
Which is just
she's gonna be an actress.
Right.
Yes.
Save the world.
So she's going to be an actress, and she's dating Ryan Philippe's football star bro Barry.
He's so good in this. He's just he's so hateful.
He's such an asshole.
Yeah.
Oh my
such
god.
a dick. Oh, yeah.
That line when he's just like, "Wow, both of you
yeah.
should get a mirror. You both look like shit," or whatever.
So blunt.
Prick.
Oh my god. And he is the guy in that whole moment where things start to hit the fan when they hit the guy and everything. He's the guy at the very the beginning of the scene too, where he's out of the sunroof and just drinking his face off and screaming.
Yeah.
It's funny with this movie especially. Like I've seen, I think it's Scary Movie 1 a bunch of times. So I can only ever, like, when I see certain scenes that they replicated, I can, like, almost see those scenes now where the guy's, like, on the sunroof and he's getting hit by certain branches and all of that as he's drinking. Like, I just couldn't help but see it. But, yeah, Ryan Phillippe does a really great douchebag performance here.
Yeah.
All time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Gellar and Ryan are both a couple in part of a friend group with Jennifer Love Hewitt, who is playing Julie James, who for all intents and purposes in this film is like the Sydney Nev Campbell kind of role, where she's the more sort of like innocent, vulnerable, final girl type character. In comparison to Gellar, they dress her in like modest white or like giant sick baggy denim overalls that she wears through like half the movie.
Well, she's depressed, so she has to wear overalls.
Yeah, of course. And she's dating the one sort of like non-rich kid in the group, Ray, played by Freddie Prinze Jr. And all of them, it's the last night of summer is getting kicked underway. The last summer before they are all headed off to college. It's like beach party vibes. They're all talking about the philosophy classes and careers and houses and children that they're going to have. And I think at one point they're like, a toast to the summer of immature adolescent decadence in that classic Williamson prose. And I like Gellar's comment too about she's having the fantasy dream about her and Ryan as a couple later in life, and she's talking about him becoming a star and going to rehab and how cool that would be, and and they're all headed to Dawson's Beach, which is one of the most overt fucking references I've ever seen. I was like, a great one, Kevin. And they're going to the beach because they're going to go get drunk and they're going to make out and drive recklessly and tell creepy, campfire ghost stories like all teen kids do. But specifically, they tell the one about the hook, the classic
the escaped mental patient, hook for a hand,
Lover's Lane.
They all have a slightly different story that they tell, which I like because it ties into the urban legend movie a lot.
Like these things are always expanding.
Yeah, is it the blood? Do they hear the blood that's dripping on the top of the car, or do they hear like the scratching of a shoe that's on the top of the car? And it's like each one has a different story.
Yeah, they're like, well, no, I actually remember it was the blood dripping from his severed head on the car. They're like, well, no, it was the blood dripping from him being gutted.
Yeah, it reminds me, actually, this is kind of
right.
more of a personal story, but when I was a kid, we would go camping all the time with my Uncle Kev, and he would always tell the story about the girl with the ribbon around her neck.
Yes.
And the first time he told it, it was like the classic story, and every single time we would go camping, he would tell a different version of it, where he would like expand it, and it's almost like the sequels. It just got bigger and more grand as the story went on. But yeah, it's got that similar vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a little disappointed that between these two movies, we didn't get my favorite one, which is the one of the girl who keeps getting up because she hears something, and there might be someone who escaped or whatever. And every time she gets up, she's comforted by the fact that she's has a dog licking her feet from underneath the bed.
That one freaks me out. Yeah.
And then they find out that there's no fucking dog at the end, and it was the guy the whole. And I was like, man, that one always freaked me out as a kid when people would tell that one. So
me too. That one and the clown statue one, or just I guess the statue.
What's
in
the clown
general.
statue one?
It's actually pretty similar to the one where she's getting her fingers licked. It's basically another babysitter is babysitting. She puts the kids to bed, and she keeps going upstairs and sees this clown statue, and she's just like, this is the creepiest thing I've ever seen. So she covers it up, and then she calls the parents, and then they tell her we don't have a clown statue, and
That's right.
then
Yes,
she goes
okay.
up and it's gone, and there's probably an ending of some sort that I can't remember, but it's a similar idea, but that one always
it's always babysitters. It's always young girls in some sort of danger. I think Jennifer Love Hewitt has the line where she's like, "Oh, this is all bullshit. It's just made up story to teach girls about the dangers of premarital sex or whatever." Right. And Freddie
Dangers
Prinze is
of
like more
babysitting.
into it. He's just like, well, they all originate from somewhere. There has to be some sort of reality that these come from, which obviously they do find out when they take the party on the road. They're blasting the rock music, hanging out of the sunroof, chugging whiskey, and they hit and kill, presumably, the fisherman that we saw in the opening. Blood all over the hood, all over Ryan, and immediately it does become a, what do we do in this situation, because we're all a bunch of young kids. This could really hurt our chances at scholarships. We can't believe that we've done this. Is he even dead? Should we go get help? Should we call, like, what do we do? And they all agree that no matter what they do, it looks sketchy. If they call the cops, they're going to get charged with manslaughter. They're going to get in a lot of trouble. Some of them are freaking out.
It doesn't help that Ryan's character literally spills the whiskey all over the car, and Freddie Prinze Jr. Yeah,
it's like, well, but I wasn't drinking. It's like, well, they're not going to believe you. You smell like a distillery.
It's just a pile on of stupid events. It's very funny, honestly.
I love that she just finds the boot. It's like, to hit someone, it's just an empty boot. He's like, oh my god. I don't know why that image just makes me laugh.
Yeah, and they end up deciding that we're just going to dispose of this body. We're gonna dump it in the water. We're gonna pretend that it was never here. And there is this little bit of a tense moment where the very cucked nerdy school guy Johnny Galecki, playing this dude named Max, pulls up, and he does try to be like, he's trying to like play it cool. He's like, what are you guys doing over there? Like Ryan's like pretending to throw up on the side of the road because he's so drunk. He's like, oh, daddy's gonna be mad at him. This guy.
That's the thing. Usually they make the underdog character a little bit more likable, but they just really don't with him. It's very strange. And then
Williamson's kind of incapable of it. He likes to make kids just hateful and horrible to each other.
Nerd, just kind of, he's just weird. He's kind of like, he's angry, and it's like, again, like when he gets killed, it's like, oh, okay, well.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Like, all of the characters kind of suck. So, I mean, that's helpful in a slasher because you don't really care if they die. Like, the only one we're supposed to really root for, I think, is Julie, and only because she's the one who, has a little bit of a protest. But it's like, well, I don't know, maybe we should call the police. Maybe.
Yeah, she's definitely the one suffering the most guilt over it as well. She's the one who definitely, is like, well, maybe when he reaches out to us and he's still alive, we don't kick him further into the water and actually murder him. While all the other ones are kind of like, well,
Julie, you dummy, no.
So naive.
Yeah, there's actually a sick underwater shot of him when they kick him into the water, and the dude looks like the zombie in Fulci's Zombie 2 or something like that. He's reaching out to them, trying to grab them, and they're like, no. He even if he wasn't dead, look, he's dead now. We've definitely murdered him now, and we need to make a pact. We're all going to take this to our grave. And Jennifer Love Hewitt is definitely the one who is she's resisting saying yes. Can I actually agree to cover this up? And it actually takes Barry having to fucking practically strangle her before she'll agree to do it.
Yeah.
It's cool how Freddie Prinze is just sort of like, hey, man, don't do that.
Yeah. Freddie Prinze is like so soft spoken as this, as like the guy who, you know, he's the one like not rich kid. So he's just trying to like fit in. He's the most like susceptible to peer pressure of the bunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they end up using his kind of like, but outside of Jennifer Love Hewitt, who's obviously the more innocent star of the whole thing. They use him as kind of the red herring a lot of the time, because of how nice he is compared to every other character. So they're like, we couldn't possibly have another calm male character in this, so he's got to be the killer because he's not acting like Ryan Phillip. It's and I honestly got a kick out of that. There's some really funny scenes in it where they start to distrust each other, like when Ryan just goes up to Freddie Prinze Jr. and says something like, "You killed him," and just punches him in the face with like no warning whatsoever. It's like it really does get pretty entertaining in that regard. It's also interesting that there's kind of this weird imbalance. Like they don't know whether or not they're gonna have the killer be more of like a physical being who is still alive and well, or if it's supernatural. And that is it's kind of interesting, because there's moments like where, you know, they find a body with like crabs all over it, and then, you know, they freak out, and when they go back, it's gone, and you're just like, that seems like it would take a lot of work to clean up.
Right.
And there's also something in the finale, which I'll save, that is also kind of supernatural. I just found that interesting, because most of the movie doesn't have that vibe, besides maybe the thought of like a ghostly figure following you. But by the end, it's kind of like, oh, this is more of just like a real kind of grounded serial killer story. So it's kind of strange.
There's a lot of things that like you could do in Scream because you had two killers, so it made sense. But it was like, well, how did he do that? It's like, well, because it was a different guy. Yeah. But yeah, here it's like, how did he possibly fill a trunk with a dead body and crabs and then get rid of it all?
Yeah.
Without anybody like it does. There's just a lot of sort of, you really have to suspend your disbelief in this one.
Yeah, it's funny to think about it too, though. Just like the stuff they didn't film, like him physically going back to the trunk and like grabbing it all and like putting it in a bag and running away,
getting all of the crabs. Like, there were a lot of crabs.
I remember us thinking it was really funny too. In like one of the later Halloween sequels, it was maybe like the 4th or 5th one, and there was this. They actually did show a scene of like Michael Myers like staging his right. You know, like the thing that the girl would like walk into and freak out at. And I just remembered being like, that it's so funny to imagine every single one of these movies, like what you are missing off screen. Yeah. Although I will say in this one, I did appreciate it on the one level, because it does just suit the idea of these kids being haunted.
Yes, totally.
Like this idea of there being like a spectral manifestation of their guilt. Like when it starts early on, it's not even a slasher. Like it is just, you know, 1 year later, Julie returns home from college. You know, she's clearly feeling guilty and unable to really enjoy the bubbly college life that she should be. Her grades are going down, and, you know, this feeling is only sort of exacerbated by these anonymous letters that she's receiving, and the one of them specifically being, "I know what you did last summer," written on it. You know, and so like, from there, the movie becomes more interesting about like, what do characters in that kind of situation, what decisions do they make? Like, especially that opening bit, like how gross the logic of what they're thinking about doing is, and then versus, you know, how that has since strained their relationships and friendships with one another, how they've drifted apart. No one talks to one another, let alone dating anyone anymore. And no one's plans or dreams of stardom ended up really working out. Like Geller is now a fragrance counter girl at like a local department store, I guess, that her family owns, because it has her name on it, with her also incredibly nasty sister,
she's so
Elsa,
mean.
played by Bridget Wilson from Billy Madison and Mortal Kombat. Her delivery of that is the dried out, washed up has-been having a moment. You know, it's like, it's just so venomous how she delivers it and everything like that too. But in this early goings, I do actually appreciate that, like, you know, could it just be this, you know, they're this supernatural thing, or are they even imagining it because they feel like they should be punished for it on some capacity? And it's when it starts getting into the more literal ridiculously of how, you know, this guy would be doing what he's doing that it kind of starts to strain a little bit for me. But when it's just the kids, you know, freaking out in their mansion and saying ridiculous things to one another, when Julie goes up to Geller and says, "Look at this note that I've got. Like, someone knows, someone is, you know, messaging us. Like, maybe it was Max who drove by and saw us in the middle of the night." And she was just like, "Well, who saw us? We were so careful." And I was like, "Were they? Were they? How careful were they?" And I think at one point too, Ryan is like, "Well, you know, how do you even know it's about this? You did a lot of things last summer," which is just fucking great line.
I also really love the scenes with Anne Heche because it's a very sort of weird, like almost haunted house kind of vibe. Like it becomes
she almost lives in like the Texas, like
it's like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of house.
Yeah, she's like the North Carolina version of the Texas Chainsaw house
or something. It's just very weird, and like the tone completely shifts.
Yeah,
and it's like it's a little out of place.
It is.
Like
you
it's
even
tacked
get
on
them
from another movie.
Yeah, you even get them cribbing the low angle shots of them approaching it that they use in Texas Chainsaw, or the porch dolly shots. And yeah, as you mentioned, like the dead animal shit, like hanging everywhere and stuff like that. So yeah, like you can tell that. And again, you're wondering, she's like, is this just like rich kids being scared that they've gone to the poor side of town? Or is this, is this just their paranoia kind of seeping into it? Like with the way that they stylize it and the way that they emphasize all of her line deliveries, because she's playing the sister of the kid that they supposedly killed, or the man that they killed. And yeah, like it really is just all like atmosphere, and you're not sure whether they're doing it to themselves in their head, or you know what it is that is exactly going down.
Yeah, I love like, you know, some of the direction here can be kind of bland and generic, but there are moments where he really does accent kind of the overly dramatic stuff that's going on, especially the paranoia. Like one of my favorite moments is when Jennifer Love Hewitt is like getting to the brink of just insanity, and she's losing it, and she starts saying stuff like she's like, "What are you waiting for?
Huh? What are you waiting for?"
And then she does it like 2 or 3 times, and on the second or third time, the camera kind of zooms out into this huge like crane shot, and she spins a whole 360 degrees as she delivers it. It's fucking amazing. It warms me up every single time. I'm just like, it's hilarious. It's so like committed the way that she's saying it. The crane shot just accents the entire thing. It's hilarious. I love it. And
God, it's so good. And then that the little fake out ending, which is just such a sort of like classic bit, and it's like it doesn't even make any sense because there's a sequel and they don't mention it at all. But like,
right, yeah, and it's again that kind of thing where it's when we get to it, it's like that imbalance of whether or not this whole thing was supernatural or not. Is this more paranoia? Is this whatever? It's like it doesn't have to make sense. They're just
don't worry about it.
We're in this teen slasher mystery, and
and like we know that it's obviously not just supernatural anymore when, you know, like when that first kill happens, because the movie wasn't slashery enough. It wasn't physical enough. It was just too ambiguous, I guess, for the executives. So they were like, well, I don't know, kill Galecki. You know, we kind of set him up as a red herring because he was there that night, and they confront him by having Ryan just go and like berate the shit out of him and just like, you know, start threatening to kill him with an ice hook next to the blocks of ice. And I was like, this is normal teen shit right here. I think too that's the scene where they also run back into Freddy, and one of the biggest laughs every single time I watch this is the reveal that like Freddy went back to like his poor lifestyle, and he's like a blue collar fisherman now, but he's just like rocking the tank top and spiked hair like he's in a 90s music video. I was like,
he looks like a Backstreet Boy.
He does not look like, he looks like he's hanging out like one of the guys who hangs out with Zoolander. You know, he just totally. Like that scene when Ben Stiller goes to like with his father and brother, and he goes into the coal mine, but he's like dressed like he's in like a magazine. That's exactly what Freddie Prinze Jr. looks like, and it makes me laugh every time.
Oh yeah, totally. I also I will say that this does have a couple cool set pieces that I have a lot of fun with. Like the first one with Ryan, where he basically just gets like ran over by the car and crashed through the big, I don't know if it's like a wooden wall of some kind where it's next to the fissure. Like the docks.
It's like the car chase / foot chase over like the boardwalk, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of sweet. Like you get this kind of bird's eye view or upper angle view of the car crashing Ryan through it and everything, and it sets up
that low angle POV shot of the fisherman like actually pulling his hook like out of his slicker. Yeah. He's looking like a Bloodborne character or something, and he's like,
yeah, and that kind of starts the whole red herring thing where it's like, well, Ryan just got attacked, so obviously he's not the killer, that kind of thing. And they do a little bit of a fake out too. It doesn't last very long, but you think that he might actually be killed, and then like one or two scenes later he's in the hospital.
Yeah.
So they try to do a couple twists here and there to keep you guessing.
The secret's killing us.
Right? Yeah, it's so good. I love any blatant line like that. That's so fun. And then the other one that I think is much better is the Sarah Michelle Gellar one. That one was.
Oh yeah, that is the one that is the most. Yeah, and that is the one too that is like the most desperate to recreate like that Wes Craven like steady cam tracking shots. Like the cutting of it, the little tilt the camera does as she approaches the stairs to catch a glimpse of like the fisherman walking into her bedroom, like those kind of shots as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's pretty.
That's
long
definitely
too.
The strongest chase set piece.
Yeah,
and it's very elaborate.
Yeah, and it's very much like Scream in the sense where like she can see the parade in front of her, and like if she can just get there, and it's like the opening Scream scene where it's like her parents are right there, and she's like trying to reach out for them, but it's like it's going to be too late because like the killer's there, and so it's definitely.
And then using
it's effective.
Yeah, definitely, and using the parade sounds so that they can't hear her screams, that kind of thing. Like it's just it's that added creep factor, and I think they have some.
I was
really
also creeped out just by the giant fish in the parade. It's just such an ominous symbol to unite the town around, because they're like it really sucks that the killer wears a cloaked fisherman's outfit, because just like every middle-aged man in town looks like this today, and you can see like Gellar and Ryan just like both looking out into the crowd. I think at one point Ryan literally just tackles an old man, like an old fisherman.
Right? Yeah, he does. He is on.
And it's just like, oh,
movie.
sorry, dude. He definitely like broke that dude's spine.
There's also a moment where, and this is kind of like. Like we said, there's not a lot of crazy violence or visceral moments, but I did kind of like the shot of the killer using the hook to drag the sister's body along the store or whatever.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot, but that one really pops out just because there isn't much. And that's all a part of this set piece as well, before he starts to chase Gellar again.
I really like the bodies on ice because it's such a sort of fun fisherman thing, it's like, oh, they can keep the fish on ice. He's keeping the body. Like, it makes no sense. I don't know why he's keeping the bodies on ice, but it's just cool within that world, I guess.
Yeah.
No, like literally, they were like, we came up with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, he was apparently, from what I understand, Williamson's dad was a commercial fisherman. So you can you could just tell that he was like, yeah, I kind of grew up with that environment a little bit, and I thought it would be kind of cool if a killer was like my dad, whatever.
What are you saying?
But then how he expands that, he is good at and has been even until recently with that. He just came out with that movie Sick, directed by John Hyams, which is his kind of like COVID slasher, and he is very good at coming up with like logic-based, like geographical, sort of like chase sequences that just keep going on and on and on, because like that one that we're talking about starts in the parade, where she's actually in the parade as like the former beauty pageant, Winner.
Mm-hmm.
And she starts freaking out because like Barry is being killed in the rafters up top, being stabbed kind of over and over again. And, you know, we see the hook in the blood hitting like the wooden posts and everything, but everyone goes up there and, you know, nothing happened. And they're just like, oh, this is like a boy who cried wolf kind of situation. The cops don't believe her. She's like, yeah, I've heard this story before. It wasn't a fisherman though. It was an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand. And then Geller is like so upset that no one believes her. And, you know, she's locked up in the back of the cop car. She's like, listen, you little shit stick Mayberry ass reject. And from there it just turns into this whole elaborate set piece of she's trapped in the back of the cop car while the patrolman is outside getting gutted by the killer. It's not as good, unfortunately, as Williamson's Scream 2 set piece where they're trapped in the car and Ghostface is literally in the driver's seat. They have to squeeze like through the window in order to get at him. Like that one, and how long it is and how Craven milks it for tension is just, you know, it's so unparalleled.
So
how
stressful.
skilled. Yeah, he was so skilled at that kind of stuff. So it's not as strong as that. But the fact that it goes from her breaking out of the car, you know, being stalked through the department store and including the shots of, you know, what Jamie was saying of her sister getting sliced and dragged around with the hook. I also like the part when I've just always liked this when they're like, which display mannequin is he under the plastic sheet? And you're just and the creepy like ambiance of like the spinning ceiling fans and the music and the lights going out while she's like looking at all of the mannequins before it like jumps down and grabs her. That's like straight out of like a Giallo or something like that. And then it's into the attic and into the alley and that huge overhead shot where you can actually see like the parade pushing past on the left side of the frame while she's on the right side just being gutted in a pile of tires. I wasn't actually sure why those were there.
I don't know why there's like just, I don't know if she's in a tire yard or what.
Yeah. Well, and I will say at this point, the movie does take off because like things are actually happening. It's the earlier set pieces that were a little more annoying to me because they were recreating that, you know, sort of like Craven feel, but they just weren't committing to the punchlines of them.
Yeah.
Because like Ryan ends up in the hospital and the first time it happens to her, she just has like her hair cut next to her Diet Coke. And I was like, oh boy. And you know, like copying the filmmaking of someone who is like way better at doing the tension and danger, and then like, you know, he would climax on like you know, someone running into a blade in the gut or something like that, and or finding the body of a friend, like when they find is it Rose McGowan's the one who gets trapped in or gets killed by the garage door?
Yes.
Like I always think about that moment when Campbell like jumps out of the second floor window, having done that whole chase set piece through the house, so good. And then she jumps out, lands in the driveway, and just sees the corpse sitting there. Like that's one of my favorite things Williamson writes, where it's like the bodies stack, and he always remembers where they are. So when the set piece keeps going and stuff like that, and I feel like this just didn't start stacking its bodies at all. The one time it gets it is the one that Emma pointed out, which is a good one when they're in the boat finale and they do actually find the bodies on ice and all her you know, all her friends are trapped in the boat. And I was like, that feels like they could have got to some of that stuff a little earlier.
Yeah. And it just doesn't make as much sense. Like we were saying, it's like, why save the bodies? Whereas like with Scream, it's kind of like, you know, they go through that whole thing and it's just different parts of the house party that they're at. So like the garage, the closets, whatever. Whereas this one just doesn't quite have that that reason for the geography find, I guess, of the body. It's just kind of like, here it is, because it's creepy.
Yeah, it feels like this is maybe like 3 drafts away from being like a better movie.
Right.
But like they were just rushing to get it out, and it's like it almost works, but then it just sort of collapses. Yeah.
There's certain things that definitely do come up short. My I guess, like I said in the beginning, my main entertainment from this is all the like the drama that comes from it, how over the top the acting becomes through the teenagers, and you know, watching something like that would be Dawson's Creek, but instead they're focusing on a murder is kind of interesting, because they do have that similar overly dramatic sense to it, and that is where a lot of the fun comes from.
Well, and the way obviously that they talk to each other when they're doing it, like after that sequence when Geller and Hewitt visit the sister of the person that they killed, and you can see Jennifer Love Hewitt like very seriously delivering a line like, we killed a man and we just saw that we've like ruined the lives of everyone around him and people he knew. Like, look at all the damage we've caused to this woman, and and the things that they're talking about. And just having Sarah Michelle Gellar be like, well, I don't think we're that powerful, Julie. You're giving us a little too much credit, I think. Maybe he wanted to die. He was standing in the middle of the road. I don't know. Like that like the aspect of where they're playfully playing up just like, how sociopathic the kids can be at times, while also, taking seriously the morality, drama and haunting of the entire thing. It definitely goes back and forth. And, one could argue that, maybe they should commit to one or the other, but I don't know. I found that the actors were pretty good at delivering all the venomous dialogue that Kevin Williamson likes to have them say.
They all committed pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone's honestly great in this. The lead actors are really selling it.
Mm-hmm. It just isn't the most like dense material, It definitely isn't like, well, and it sounds like if they maybe made a truer version of the book, it maybe could have been. They actually focused on the character, and they actually did write the characters to, have a little bit more weight to this experience that they're going through, which is pretty dark.
Yeah. Especially if they kept the child murder.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would have been a lot easier to go into.
Yeah, but no, you can definitely tell that they were like, no, we really want like a masked killer. We want the murder mystery. We want to, ultimately we want to get this to be a sort of like physically tangible kind of scary movie, and kids to be screaming and people to be getting chased. And they do end up coming to the conclusion, or at least Jennifer Love Hewitt's character Julie does, that what they didn't hit. They didn't hit the guy that they thought that they hit, because because what happened is they hit this guy whose girlfriend had died, and that he had maybe been responsible for the accident and that he had constantly been like on the site of the accident hanging out there, and they just assumed that's who it was because that's whose body they came up in the water. But what it turns out in the big, sort of like climactic twist of the movie is that they actually hit the girlfriend's dad, who was really upset that this guy killed his daughter, and he had actually just finished murdering the dude at the exact same spot, which is such like a ridiculous coincidence that is, it's so ridiculous I actually kind of like it.
Yeah, it's great, and it really lets them all off the hook.
Yeah, and it does.
Morally,
no pun intended.
No, it's fine that we hit him because he's a murderer.
That's right.
Yeah, it's such a cop out. Like, it's so like
and no cops find out or anything like that. They even have a moment with like Freddie Prinze Jr. and Jennifer Love Hewitt just kind of like, that's what happened. Moving on with our lives now.
Like, why was this guy trying to kill you? And they're like, I don't know.
Couldn't tell you. Peace.
Yeah, it's so funny to spend so much of the movie and for us to be praising the movie for, at the very least, the few moments where it takes like the morality tale aspect seriously.
Yeah.
To just be like, oh, actually, there was no reason for any of it. They didn't need to feel guilty the whole time. They literally they ran over a murderer who was so much worse than them. And honestly, they probably should have finished the job. That would have prevented all of this. Like that's the text of this movie.
Yes.
It's very funny to end on that note after just so much paranoia and mystery and red herrings and all that. It does kind of make it more entertaining in a way. It is funny.
Well, because I will say the actual sequence itself is like not terrible. It's just it's so hilarious how much it undercuts the rest of the movie. But like, the actual sequence itself of, Hewitt going onto the boat and seeing the newspaper clippings and photographs of her and her friends like a shrine, and turning it into like this elaborate pirate boat like deck chase where like Ray is getting like launched off the boat and having to come back on and like literally fist fight the fishermen. It's so ridiculous just describing it.
Yeah.
And he does lose his hand, which is just so great.
Oh, yes, yes. that is like the one, like, particularly violent moment that it gets after the big sequence where they're, hiding below deck and going through all the various compartments and everything like that, and finding her corpseified friends like frozen dolls in the ice, and him going Freddy mode, the killer going Freddy mode, of being like, "Happy 4th of July, Julie." Or what's the other one too? He's like, let me give you some advice. When you leave a man for dead, make sure that he's really dead. Followed by, like Ray hitting him in the head with the crane piece, and, his hand being sliced off by all of the, the rope rigging and everything like that in the boat. It is funny that the rope gets around his hand and he flies up into like the mast of the boat, which is then where it slices off. So he gets to like, he gets like launched into the air and into the water, and then his hand holding the hook gets to like stick around in the netting and everything like that. It is a fun little image.
Yeah. It is really fun that this takes more of it's an action beat almost, instead of the like horror confrontation that we're used to with this kind of thing.
No, it's like the classic moment in the 80s action movie when the hero like pulls out a rocket launcher and blows up the bad guy, but it's it's like the 90s slasher version of that.
Except this time it'd be like a harpoon or something, because they got to keep it fish oriented, Oh man.
Yeah, Harpoon. It just reminded me of Wild Things. Speaking of Wild Things, what a great movie.
Absolutely.
None of these movies, unfortunately, live up to the great twisty neo-noir nonsense of Wild Things. And it's also, speaking of characters who make just horrendous decisions and are so delightfully terrible.
Yeah, that's honestly something that could have maybe upped this just a bit more too. Would just be
make
more
them worse.
Twists, and because the thing with Wild Things, and they're wildly different movies, but it's the twists in that, the ongoing crazy nonstop twists in those is what really sells that movie a lot of the time too. Aside from the performances and all that, but.
Maybe making these teens even a little bit more cutthroat or something like that, if that's what they were going to go for, or you know.
But overall, like some great sequences when it comes to like the chase stuff. I do love all the drama and all the paranoia, and Jennifer Love Hewitt's, especially her performances when she really starts to amp it up. So there's stuff to like in this for sure.
I think it's fun. It is a Scream knockoff, but you could pick a worse movie to knock off.
Yeah,
that's also true.
Definitely.
And also there are worse Scream knockoffs. Like there were so many Scream knockoffs. Oh my God. But yeah, no, if we're pivoting towards reductive rating round on this one kind of ends up in like the kind of lighter 3 territory for me, where I definitely do see, as Emma was putting it, like so many little things that they could do to just be a slightly better movie, like to take the sort of like moral weight at the center of, them making this gross decision and being haunted by it, like either taking that a little bit more seriously instead of undercutting it by making it a commercial slasher, or if you're going to go full nonsense ridiculous commercial slasher where the characters are incredibly nasty, like lean further into that. It feels like it's not quite choosing which one it wants to do. But the teens are fun. The 90s fashion trends are fun. The idea of making like a teen TV melodrama, like as Jamie was putting it, like Dawson's Creek or like OC style characters ending up in like a much darker kind of story and arguing with one another and being horrible to one another. There is some entertainment out of that. And, and as Emma was putting it, I think there's worse things for you to try to recreate, even if you're not doing it anywhere near as well, than Wes Craven. Like Wes Craven did amazing, anamorphic tracking shots, great little tense, elaborate chase sequences and stuff. And, it's the kind of stuff I do wish kind of hung out in horror a little bit more. Because even these new Scream movies that they're doing, where they're, that are coming out now, they aren't actually recreating the craft of Craven that much. Right. Where I'm like, why is no one else doing this? Like you watch the John Hyams, Kevin Williamson slasher Sick, like that is way closer to the actual craft of what Craven was doing with his suspense sequences, and which is why if you go back to them, those movies still hold up and are still memorable today. And so the few moments where they're doing that in this, I think they're doing an okay job at it. I do just wish that, you know, the first really good one is they wait for a really long time for it. It's the one with Geller, who does like 4 chases in one.
Yeah.
Because the one with Ryan is decent, but again, it just ends with him in the hospital, and the other one in the house is okay, but she just gets her hair chopped off. It's a lot of build up for not a lot.
Yeah, it feels like it's always just pulling its punches slightly in this movie. Like
exactly,
they're never like fully going over the top, or like again, like not really knowing what do we want to be, like a full on slasher, or do we want to be a mystery? Like they just always are tentative. Like there's a hesitation there.
Yeah, it feels like...
and that does hurt the movie for sure, which is why it kind of hangs out in the low 3 for me.
Yeah, it feels like Gillespie wanted to focus on a more grounded mystery, and the studio is like, no, we want a slasher, and you can see those things battling each other.
Yeah, you can. It's fighting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I would still give it like a 3. It's I have fun with it. I really do like the performances. I think that they're selling all of this really well. Gillespie does get a couple cool directing moments, like the chase sequences, specifically, like you said, Josh, Sarah Michelle Gellar's is awesome. Like the 4-in-1 chase sequence is really good, honestly. I have fun with all the red herrings and all of that. It's just, it doesn't quite know what it wants to be fully. It's not a very fully realized project, but there's still great fun to be had. And I do like seeing, Freddie Prinze Jr. looking like a Backstreet Boy and still trying to play this like kind of emotional, down bad guy.
I'm the blue collar hunk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's entertaining, and yes, having these like Dawson Creek characters being thrown into a horror movie is a fun idea. So it's
and
got
I
some
think this
moments.
movie really is saved by the cast. Like without those actors in those parts, I don't think this would be anywhere near as watchable. Like they have so much charisma, and they have that sort of like star power of the 90s, and I think that's really the saving grace of the film.
Yeah, totally agree. So yeah, for me it's a 3.
For you, Emma.
For me?
Yeah.
My rating?
Yeah, what's your rating? Give us your rating. How do you feel about it?
I mean, it's I have a lot of nostalgia for it, which I think is coloring, but yeah, I'd put it at like a maybe a 2.5.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So it doesn't quite get there for you for something?
It doesn't quite. I just want it to be better than it is, but I do think it's a super enjoyable watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm basically in the exact same boat. Like it's just but I will say too though, the soundtrack includes The Offspring, Our Lady Peace, Korn.
Hell yeah,
you know.
dude.
Do we have to go back? You know,
we do.
I'm
we
thinking
do.
Of, you know,
I miss when the credits break and it's just this insane new metal or rock song. I miss it. It's such a good vibe.
Yeah, like the fact that there is a 70s book about kids being haunted about murdering someone, and it's like scored to like Korn.
Yeah, it ends with POD kind of thing.
Yeah, it's such a specific thing that exists that I definitely find some charm to it.
Lois Duncan like watching this in the theater and just being like, what the fuck?
Yeah. No, she was apparently like horribly offended that they were just, because it's just so obvious how like again, we've talked about it, like it's functional. And I think there's stuff about it that definitely works in the suspense set pieces, but it's so obvious how like this like wasn't a slasher, and they were like, well, now we need to meet all of these trends, no matter, even if it like is complete nonsense, and it completely undoes the actual guilt that they're feeling. Like, like even the basic idea of, we have a story about kids who run over a little boy and feel bad about it. What if instead, it was really interesting, they ran over Ghostface? You know?
Right. So they don't have to feel bad.
And they were like, that's the same story when you think about it. And dramatically, I'm looking at them, I'm like, all right, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I think the inescapable guilt.
But despite that insane flaw at the center of it, this is still pretty fun.
Yeah, I do think it had the more inescapable guilt of killing a child. I think that would have really propelled it into especially when it comes to the dramatics. They'd have to go even more over the top, but it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a completely different movie.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for I Know What You Did Last Summer. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about one that honestly I think got even a little crazier with some of the twists and murders. We're going to be talking about Urban Legend. Stick around.
I want to know what's going on here.
Someone out there is taking all these urban legends and making them reality.
Urban Legend.
Have you heard the one about the microwave?
All right, we are back, and we are talking Urban Legend, the 1998 American teen slasher film directed by Jamie Blanks, written by Silvio Horta, and starring Jared Leto, Alicia Witt, Joshua Jackson, Rebecca Gayheart, and a bunch of others that we'll get into. This cast is actually kind of insane.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a pretty stacked cast, yeah.
Now, I have to ask both of you, are either of you familiar with Jamie Blanks or Silvio Horta at all before going into this?
Nope.
I don't think no, there was Valentine for some reason has always been on my list because it was one of those, going into the video movie shop, I would see the poster and I knew it was a horror movie and I was always intrigued by that, but I never got around to watching it. And as for the writer, let me just take I guess, did she only do Urban Legend? From Letterboxd, that's all that's popping up. I'm curious what else.
Well, that's what I was going to get into, because this movie has a bit of a wild path towards existing. And Horta, specifically, is a queer Cuban-American who actually tragically committed suicide just a couple years back, and is actually most well known for adapting a very popular Colombian telenovela series that would become Ugly Betty for ABC. So it's actually TV is where most of their writing is. And anyway, apparently he went while at NYU developed this sort of parody slasher script that became this, about a serial killer who plans elaborately staged deaths based on various urban legends, which got picked up obviously in the wake of Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer by the actual producer of I Know What You Did Last Summer, which they then put into the hands of this Australian director Jamie Blank, who had actually auditioned to direct both films, Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, because he had done this thesis short film called Silent Number, which I actually did find on YouTube. It's out there if you look it up.
Ooh.
Which is about a babysitter who keeps getting phone calls during a stormy night from a little boy who is like saying that his like abusive father has like locked him up and he can't get out, and she doesn't know where the call is coming from. She's trying to let the cops know that she's being called, and the big twist is that the cops eventually call her back and say the power line, the phone lines were actually like taken down. That creepy guy who came up to your door and started talking to you and you thought he was like an escaped mental patient, he was actually a guy who crashed his car into the phone lines right out front of your house, and you've been talking to nobody. And the final shot is like the power line following the broken phone line all the way to the cemetery, where she's either been talking to a dead ghost boy tomb or like a kid who's been buried alive, and you're not sure which.
Oh shit, that's kind of
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's actually a pretty good and like well-directed little suspense short film. And with that, and also I think he took a scene, or he did a fake trailer for I Know What You Did Last Summer, and used his own money, got his own friends to shoot it, and he sent it to the producer with the short film and was like, for the love of God, like I am dying to make a movie like this. I love this shit. And he didn't get I Know What You Did Last Summer, obviously, as we just talked about. But the producer did note him and go, wow, this guy is really cool and really into this kind of thing. So we should keep him on. We should keep his phone on file. And then that was it. This script came to him and he was like, this is the guy who's going to do it. And he's basically spent his entire career doing variations on it. Like Jamie mentioned, Valentine. Mm-hmm. There's another thriller called Storm Warning that he did about a couple that gets trapped and there's like a killer outside. And then he also did the remake of the Australian eco-horror classic Long Weekend, which we've actually talked about very early on the show as well. And I don't know about either of you, but I actually went into this being like, I I expected this to be worse for some reason. And I know I don't really know why I had that attitude about it. It looked more low rent to me.
Yeah.
Something about that.
I mean,
Jamie also previously watched it, didn't like it, but I actually thought the direction in this was really like a lot stronger and more stylish and animated and wild.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I feel like it was probably lower budget, right? I mean,
probably. Let's do a double check here. It was $14 million for this one. Was the budget, I think. I wasn't sure what I Know What You Did Last Summer was, but yeah, this is my second time watching it, and for some reason, I guess
only slightly. I Know What You Did Last Summer was 17 million. So 17 million versus 14 million. But a lot of that 17 million, I think you can tell, went to the actors on that one.
Yeah, probably.
This one, I think that they were using actors they maybe didn't quite have to pay as much. They also shot it in Toronto.
At the time,
so they probably saved some money there as well.
Yeah, for some reason, the first time I watched this is now my second time, and I took to it much better this time. The first time, there was something in my brain, I guess I just wasn't reading it correctly, and I thought it wasn't as... I remember it not being as tongue-in-cheek as it actually is. And there's a lot of moments in here I think I just misread. And this time around, I ended up liking it. So I'm glad to say that I went from strongly disliking it to liking it, which is great. So I'm glad you brought it back on the show and I had a chance to rewatch.
Yeah.
I think the way that this one kind of copies Scream is that it's very meta. And
yeah, you can tell even the way
that
like Jamie Blanks does like pop-up scares and stuff like that. There's almost so many of them there's so many fake outs that at a certain point, like I got kind of a kick out of that. Like they didn't work on the level of, scaring me, giving me that jolt a lot of the time. But there's so many. Like we're talking almost every scene that someone's investigating and there's some type of suspense going on. Someone pops up and there's the big, high string tension and all of that. And it becomes just more and more, in my opinion anyway, like funny and kind of ironic in a way. So.
Yeah, but and it's a good mix because like clearly it is written with a little bit of a winking sort of like clever attitude to it, which is like definitely more of a pulling from Scream than even I Know What You Did. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer, I guess maybe because of the material that was being adapted, it was pretty straightforward. Like and it was and like some of the ways that the kids talk to each other was very Williamson, but like there weren't like as many flat out like gags or jokes or like we kind of know our genre history and here our characters are finding themselves inside of it and how do we twist it a little bit. And you can just tell how excited this like young director was to get a chance to make scenes like this, like the use of color and shadows, the use of geography. There's so many hilarious like setup and payoff moments that take place in this, and really nasty ones too, in like a a ridiculous and comedic way, but in a way that still really like hit you. I could tell right off the bat what I was in for because the opening sequence, sort of like his short film, is like just like a you could completely disconnect it from the rest of the movie. It kind of exists as its own little set piece, and it really sets the tone of like what you can expect from this, where you have a university student named Michelle driving on like the stormy Toronto sort of North Toronto like back roads a little bit, and she's blasting her cassette of Total Eclipse of the Heart so that you get these sounds of turn around, and I was sitting there going, oh my God, there's a guy in the back of her car. And I spent the whole scene as she's getting into near crash scares or as she's running out of gas and having to go visit a late night stuttering gas station attendant played by Brad Dourif.
Yeah, that was god. I always forget that he's in the intro of this movie. I'm like, holy shit.
So great.
And there's such good like tense cutting in this moment where she's like freaked out because this guy just looks creepy to her because it's Brad Dourif. She's just like, he doesn't look right. He looks like he'd attack me. I want to lock myself in the car.
That and he's doing like a weird stutter thing and he can't get the words out. It's just everything about it is so great.
It's of course storming. It's just pouring rain,
Yeah, and it's one of those like huge like movie artificial storms that's like so ridiculous like it couldn't be real, and the overhead like Dutch angle of the car while we can see him like filling up the gas and cutting to the gas dials while it's going through, and just how well timed stuff like the elements of this are, and how cleverly constructed they are, in like kind of almost like a Rube Goldberg sense, where it is like, you know, Brad Dourif, they include that detail of him kind of looking into the backseat of her car, and you know, you're not sure what exactly he sees, but he immediately goes over and pulls her aside. He's like, you got to come inside, I'm on the phone with the credit card company and they're not taking your card, you need to come talk to me. And he's having a hard time getting it out because he's stuttering, which leads to the amazing moment when she goes in there and sees that he's lying, and he's lying to protect her because he saw that someone was in the backseat of her car and is like, I'm trying to save you. But it's done in this very Scream-esque fashion where it's just like he can't get the words out, and she finds out that he lied, and she's already creeped out and paranoid because of the setting of just the situation itself, that she's like running away from him like he is like, you know, the person who's gonna murder her. And that giant like peel out that she does, followed by Dourif's like, there's someone in the backseat, and the lightning striking in the background, like just the mood of it, like it's hilarious, but like really well directed and dynamic.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts about the direction in this is when they get into the actual garage and she notices like no one's on the phone, and so she assumes the worst and all of that. The way that he choreographs the fight too is like Brad, especially once you get the context of everything, you can tell that like Brad is just trying to calm her down, but because she's pushing back, it looks like more of a fight. And as an audience member, at least the first time you watch it, he tries to keep that mystery there, like whether or not this guy is an awful person and trying to kill her. And it is honestly, it's pretty well directed in that sense, where it keeps that mystery alive before he finally gets that awesome line that you just said, which Dourif just sells so well. I love when he screams that line, and then, you know, we get into the serial killer scene.
And the huge like push in on his face too, like it's
in the rain. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's
very silly, but it's really well directed. And that was just what surprised me going into this, as I went into it being like, I've never heard of this guy, it's somehow it's even a knockoff after I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I was just, I didn't go into this thinking that the directing was actually going to be the thing that kind of stood out to me about this movie and some of the visual choices that they make. Even something as simple that's very tongue-in-cheek, like doing the Pendleton University sign when they actually pull up to the school, and it literally is designed to look like a giant tombstone.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's just a good joke.
Yeah. Even the mood setting of it all is almost, it's pure horror, which is interesting. Like at the very beginning, they have these like female choirs, and it's genuinely doing like a horror score, even though this does end up being a little bit more meta and all of that. But I think it's kind of, I mean, it does dive into horror elements a lot of the time. It's not like this thing is completely like a spoof or something like that. But I do like that they
made by
still,
someone who loves horror and has immersed himself in horror.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I like that he still keeps that setting alive, and then just starts to kind of playfully, use those tools so that he can mess with the audience a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he does get some help from the cast here, which is like a bizarre, one of the most bizarre casts I've ever seen in a movie.
For real.
Because it is like half of it is, like some variation of like a fresh baby-faced like network TV actor of some kind. You have a very early My So-Called Life era Jared Leto performance as the student journalist who is investigating the murders. Obviously a massively egotistical kind of asshole of an actor. Yeah, he's got all kinds of. Did you guys see that thing about him like climbing a building recently? I didn't investigate that, but that was going around on Twitter. He was
seems like such an exhausting person.
Yeah, he's going hard on the
I did like all the
TikToks now
jokes
and
of people being like, he was trying to get into the underage girl room or whatever.
Yeah, I remember. I guess it's not in like a total sidetrack, but like, did you guys see his whole island thing that he was doing a few years ago?
Cult.
Yeah, just he's a weird guy.
He didn't know COVID was happening because he was living Midsummer.
Like, just got internet. What is happening in those ages?
Dude, that is some psychopathic pretty boy rich shit. I don't even know what the hell is going on with him, but yeah.
Yeah, but obviously he's been used well in movies. Things like American Psycho used him well. Anything Fincher, like Fight Club and Panic Room. Yeah. I love his crazy ass white boy cornrows in Panic Room, and that part when his home invasion robbery plan starts going to shit, and he just immediately whips out a crack pipe. That just it's one of those gestures and the way that he physically performs, it's one of those things I'll never forget.
Totally.
Although, by the way, apparently Jared Leto either as a bit just pretends he doesn't remember making this movie, or like maybe he had some sort of brain damage. I'm not. Someone in our Discord linked me to an IGN interview article that he did in like 2003 or 2004, where he claims to have literally not heard of this movie.
What?
And they were like,
he's like second bill. He's like the second star of this.
Yeah, no, I'll maybe link it in the description so people can. It needs to be read to be believed. Like, he's just straight up like, I've never heard of this movie. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, are you pulling my leg? Like, you were in 1998. Like, you're second build. Like, what? Like, it's a horror film. And he's just like, I've literally never heard of this movie, and like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think he's just being Mr. Eccentric artist.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's just being obnoxious. He remembers.
He loves doing that, and it, the character kind of works for it as the the guy who is gleefully reporting on this decapitated student from the opening sequence, because I guess maybe we didn't mention that, but that sequence climaxes on her not turning around and a dude in a parka with an axe who is revealed in these awesome lightning strike shots where you can just make out his figure in the back of the car, which is very Craven-esque, and he just like swings the axe and goes slow motion through the window, and the blood pours out. And he's Paul, who Jared Leto is playing, is reporting on this story. And I like that gag where he asks Brenda, played by Rebecca Gerhardt, for a quote, and she jumps into like excited like politician mode. She's like, well, I am incredibly disturbed but also moved by the Natalie, who is the lead character here, played by Alicia Witt, who's actually most known, I think, for being in David Lynch stuff, despite the fact that she's not like necessarily the biggest character, but she played Aaliyah in his version of Dune.
Yep.
And is also the piano playing little girl in the fairy princess outfit in Twin Peaks. I think she's only in like 1 or 2 episodes, but it's a very memorable scene. It's the one where Laura Palmer has to go over to like the family friend's house, and like Leland Palmer is doing like a whole song and dance routine for like 5 minutes, and she's the little girl playing the piano. And I was like, oh damn, there you go.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and she's basically the Jennifer Love Hewitt of this film.
Yes, she is the actual, like, tortured young girl who's taking this seriously faster than anybody else, and, not cracking jokes like Joshua Jackson from Dawson's Creek is in the film with his bleach blonde hair, like cracking jokes about, it's so sad she died. She gave great head, and he's like nudging them. He's like, yeah, you just say what I'm saying there. Her head came off.
Yeah. So right away you have the establishment of like this group of friends that, doesn't really care about the murders, but there's the one that does. She's concerned because
they'll have that disaffected attitude that they have in Scream when they're all discussing like Drew Barrymore's death, and they're all just like, who cares about her, whatever. Let's go back to having
the Lillard character that's just making all the jokes about it, except without the incredible performance. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and you also have Michael Rosenbaum. Any fans of Smallville? This is the episode where I embarrassingly reveal how much TV I watched as a child.
I've always liked Rosenbaum. He's been movie-wise, he's been in a lot of stuff that I haven't really taken to, but I've always thought he was kind of funny, and he honestly plays the. I've seen him in interviews, and he seems like a very fun-loving guy, honestly. But every time I see him in a film, he's playing like just a huge asshole. And he's very good at that.
Here he's like the frat party bro who's explaining why they have he specifically holds a frat party to commemorate the Stanley Hall massacre at the school. Yeah.
Which I guess
is another thing that they would do in Scream too. You feel like it's like when all the kids are like wearing the costume around school and shit like that.
Yeah, and I guess kind of the initial mystery of that urban legend is whether or not it happened and if it is real, and then it kind of ties in later on into the main plot of it all.
Yeah, because Paul, because I think it's the first scene where we meet them all. It's like that campus coffee shop sequence, and Michael Rosenbaum playing Parker, the frat bro, is telling the story to the girls. Brenda, played by Rebecca Gayheart from Jawbreaker, who has a lot of like Madsonomic like energy, or at least look in this film. You could almost feel, I felt like they were modeling after her in Twin Peaks a little bit. And Paul, Jared Leto, shows up and he overhears and he's like, "Nah, that's just fake. That's made up. That's an urban legend. It's like Bloody Mary. You know, it's all that shit. Like, you guys are just, you know, whatever. No one believes that shit." And Rosenbaum does hit him back with the he just can't stand any story that doesn't have his byline on it.
Yeah.
Which is very
probably accurate.
Journalist burn.
Yeah, which is there is some truth to that, I think. And but yeah, as we mentioned, Natalie, played by Alicia Witt, is like the only person who's like kind of taking this seriously. Like, she's actually traumatized because she and Michelle were high school friends, the girl who died in the opening scene, and they were connected by this accident where they were playing that like high beam highway game where you flash your high beams and you get into kind of like a bit of like a chase with someone. A thing that only makes me think of Death Proof. That's the only thing I think of every time someone brings up that story now, because that's exactly what Kurt Russell does. He flips the high beams on, crashes into their car, and kills them all.
Did you guys ever have, like when you were kids, an urban legend or two that was something that people believed around the town? Because the headlight one, when I was young, was actually something that people said that was real.
Oh, really?
Whatever. Yeah.
I can't remember, actually.
Yeah, it's a kind of a specific question, but
Yeah, we had a couple. There was there was this one in San Antonio where there are these train tracks where supposedly if you go and you park your car on the train tracks and you're supposed to cover the back of your car with baby powder, and something will push your car off the tracks, and then when you go to look, you're supposed to see like children's handprints in the baby powder, because the story is that the story is that like a bus full of school children died on the train tracks. I don't think this really happened, but everyone believed it and like talked about it like it was true, and we did it in college.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Well, I mean, I think the movie was kind of smart to like take that into account to its storytelling. Where like, yeah, you know, it's called urban legend. It's based on the serial killer who's killing people and recreating and staging these various urban legends and, you know, bringing them into the real world in a way. But the levels of like disagreements that people have about them, and, you know, like the way that they're spread actually does become a little bit of a subject of the film, especially when we're introduced to Robert Englund from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, who's playing the Professor Wexler, who is teaching the most like basic bitch college course I've ever seen. I would have loved this course.
He's doing it with such like bravado, like he's like an absolute mastermind. I think that is great the way he's selling it.
It's wonderful, dude. He's hamming it up so much as the contemporary folklore professor who's just like, you know, teaching them about the call is coming from inside the house, or, you know, teaching them about little Mikey, what company was that for? I can't remember.
Was it a cereal thing?
Yeah, it was one of the big cereal companies. They had little Mikey, and that is a funny scene when they, you know, in order to, you know, display all of our collective cultural fears over these things that we don't necessarily believe are real, he gives Brenda Pop Rocks and then hands her a can of Pepsi and is like, you know, drink this, and she's just like, well, no, I can't. Like, little Mikey exploded, you know, like that.
I like too that
and she's like, well, if you think this is all stupid, then why won't you just drink it then, you know?
Yeah, and I like too that, like, you know, given the context of where this movie eventually ends in the finale, that they have Brenda be the one that's kind of playing stupid and being like, oh yeah, that urban legend happened in my hometown, and no, I'm not going to drink the Pepsi and all of that. I do like that, and I also like that how focused it is on the entire idea of urban legends, especially in this intro where it's like 3 scenes in a row where that's all they're talking about. Like, we have the one in the cafe, and then the moment after that they're talking about the Bloody Mary ritual, and then they try to do that, and then it leads to a pop-up, and then right after that they're at the urban legend class that Robert Englund is teaching. So it's just like nonstop with the
and obviously the opening one is the classic, like, check your back seat. Come on, everyone knows that one. Check your fucking back seat. So yeah, this thing like really moves through its premise and really is actually like this is one of those, we were talking about Romancing the Stone last week, and I was kind of going, it's a really good premise that the movie just doesn't, like, it kind of half bakes it a little bit. It doesn't totally commit to it. This is one of those examples of, it's like, it's an incredibly silly premise that I don't know how good it is, but the movie commits to it so much that it actually kind of turns it into something that really does work for me, because all of the kids are talking about it or cracking jokes about it. Like when Joshua Jackson comes up, and he's the frat prankster, so he goes up and does the Pop Rocks and Pepsi drink, and then he like pretends to literally like he's about to explode, and it creates this whole like tense moment where everyone's going, oh my god, it actually came true, and all this kind of stuff. And it does actually bake into why the students and why the people would be a little bit more in denial about all of this stuff, like more like than you would expect, because they go, yeah, that shit's urban legend. Like, who gives a shit? Like, yeah, the creepy gas attendant killed the girl. That's all that was. Who cares about that?
And committed suicide. Like there's it's
exactly.
easier to believe the
normal
because they're almost in like a little bit of a paranoid setting, right? Or in like a jokester setting. So how the characters actually respond to these things that are cropping up, it does get to the point where the bodies are stacking a lot, and it's kind of like, okay, we should be paying a little bit more attention. But like early on, especially,
it is funny that all the like as the bodies pile on, they just all the kind of like adults with authority just keep making excuse after excuse after excuse why there's just a massacre happening. I did get a kick out of that. Yeah,
and I love the dean.
The dean is funny.
Just coming like he plays him almost like he doesn't believe in any of the murders so much that he'd have to be the killer, and then he gets killed, and you're like, this guy was just a terrible dean and totally irresponsible.
You're just really bad at your job.
Yeah. I also speaking of funny enough, wild things. You know that scene in the gymnasium where he puts like sex on the blackboard and everyone's like, ooh, ah, or whatever. They kind of have a similar vibe in the England professor scene where Joshua Jackson comes up and says like, I'll do the Pop Rocks, and everybody actually goes like, oh, he's gonna do the Pop Rocks.
Oh boy,
it's so funny. And then he like fucking fakes his death with an honestly like Oscar-worthy performance if this was a college kid in the class. And everyone, when he fakes it and he's just like, haha, it's a prank, they're all just like, oh, you little scamp, like that kind of thing. I really do think the tone in these scenes are really funny and well done.
Yeah, my favorite part about that wild things that you mentioned too is he doesn't just write sex and they all go, yeah. He also follows it up with crimes and then underlines like crimes, and they all go, boo.
Oh man,
just one of my favorite movie moments ever.
Me
probably
too,
so I'm glad that you brought it up. And I will say, like, this, like, that playfulness is a little bit more present to me in something like this, where like it does appear to just be having so much fun with the ridiculousness of it.
I mean, they play the Dawson's Creek music when
yes, that made me lose my mind, because not only is it the Total Eclipse of the Heart where they're using the turnaround for the backseat of the car, I Don't Want to Wait by Paula Cole plays as Joshua Jackson turns on the radio to take Natalie out to supposedly, also he's gonna drive her to like Lover's Lane to talk to her and comfort her. I was like, girl, what are you doing? I was like, you're going to have to punch this dude. You're going to have to reject this dude, which obviously ends up happening. And he ends up leaving the car to go for a piss and getting hanged in the tree above the car, but in this ridiculous, like legitimate Rube Goldberg fashion where like she's starting the car and like rolling the windows up as the killer in the parka is coming up to her, and she can hear his feet squeaking on the roof, which is what we heard about in the legend actually. And I Know What You Did Last Summer, so there's a little bit of connective tissue there where she actually does get to live that legend briefly. But when she slams that gas pedal, and I realize that the rope is actually connected to it like a pulley system, and he just like skyrockets into the tree, like, being hanged to death.
How did this killer set this up? Like,
I don't know.
I think it shows him like tying a rope to a hitch, and that's about it. And then you just have to assume that he understands the pulley system fully from there. And I like that they also do kind of a double fake out in a way where, she starts driving to escape and run over the killer. And then it pulls him up, and you think like that's going to be the end of the death or whatever. And then she reverses to get away once again, and he just comes piling down onto the windshield.
Yeah.
And what's funny too is the scene after this, they're having these characters with authority try to come up with like an excuse, and they say something like, "You saw a mannequin" or something, like it wasn't a real person. You're like, it seemed pretty visceral and real at the time, I have to say. But yeah,
but they're like, no, he loves pranks. He has a mannequin. He's used it before.
Yeah, he's snowboarding. Yeah, it's. Oh my god.
Yeah, that's great. And also all the little cutting of like just how it like builds, because like this is what I thought was a lot stronger than I Know What You Did Last Summer, was how it actually like builds the minute details of what's happening in scenes like this, and how it goes, yeah, she's scared, she's trying to drive away, and she gets stuck because the body is hanging off the tree, and she just lifted it up into the tree and she can't get any further, so then she has to reverse. But the shots of there for you to connect the pieces before you actually see it are great, like having her hit reverse and you're like, oh, wait a second. And then you see a close-up shot of like the rope falling and you're like, oh God. And then you get, Joshua Jackson slamming through the windshield. You have like 10 seconds before where you're putting the pieces together on how this is actually all going to act and react before it ends up actually happening and him actually coming through the windshield. So there's just so much good kind of like setup and payoff. And one of my favorite examples of that is the roommate death.
Yes.
Which I think is one of the
really
cleverest
freaky
and most like visually witty things that they do, where played by, I want to mention, Danielle Harris from Halloween 4 and 5. She's the little girl. She's fucking Jamie.
Yeah. And she was in the remakes as well, right? With
she was in the Rob Zombie remakes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very awesome.
Which is also awesome because she's blasting Rob Zombie during her sex scene.
Yes.
But it was one of those things where they set it up so early. I didn't expect it to pay off in the way that it did, because it's just at first you think it's just like a casual college, those teens kind of like gag, where Natalie walks into her dorm room and her goth roommate is just getting pounded and she's like, turn the fucking lights off. And Spook Show Baby by Rob Zombie is just blasting, and she has to, in order to stop hearing her having sex all night, she needs to put her little her CD Walkman on in bed and listen to her songs. And she's also getting into fights with her over phone and internet usage. Remember when you couldn't you had to use one or the other?
Yeah, the dial-up. Yeah, you even get the scene where she lifts up the phone and you hear the dial-up connection sound and all of that. It's very nostalgic, honestly.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, it's very funny too, the way that they it's kind of cruel the way they treat the goth girl in this. Like, she's just
totally. She's just
person.
Online being like, any goth guys wanna fuck,
and being incredibly
we're on
short.
Similar dark paths on like the instant messaging like forums or whatever the fuck that she's on.
Yeah, and she plays it or they write her just very short with Natalie. It doesn't seem like she wants to even try to be cordial whatsoever, and they write her to be fairly unlikable, to be honest. And it is kind of it might have just been like a thing of the times or whatever, but they even make fun of her for being on lithium for depression.
I know.
And shit like that. It's fucking wild, to be honest. But yeah, I think it's the way they play it is mean-spirited, but it is also, once again, kind of like tongue-in-cheek again, a little bit.
But I just mean like the actual tracking shot itself and like the craft of it when she walks in, because what happens is she walked in the first time, she saw them having sex, she goes and she puts her headphones on to not listen to it. This you can tell that on some level this is a ritual. Like, don't turn the lights on, and also she's making loud noises over in the corner because she's having sex. That's just how it works.
Right.
So the second time when she walks in, and we've been seeing the killer is the one who's been instant messaging her and wanting to hook up with her and coming over. And it's so clever when the killer starts strangling her in her bed and she's walking back. And I was like, well, how's the killer going to get out of this? He's clearly not finished strangling her. She's opening the door. And what he does is he pulls out all of the like lights so that she can't actually turn them on. And so when she hears a scuffle happening in the corner of her dorm room, she goes, oh, she's just, that's my roommate having sex again, having rough sex again, whatever. I guess I'm going to go and put my headphones on. And the fact that I thought it was going to end there, I thought it was going to be like, oh, like that's, kind of a mean joke, but they actually commit to the set piece of it, of her actually being followed into the room in a tracking shot and actually like getting comfortable and getting into bed and putting her headphones on while we can see the killer strangling her in the background of the tracking shot. Like, it's so good.
Yeah. I also
and there's even the part where she like almost turns on the light and she's like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. She wanted to be a respectful roommate. And this time, I do.
Which obviously leads into the "Aren't you glad you didn't turn the light on in blood?" like urban legend, right?
Yeah, which is like really effective. That was one that always creeped me out. There's always this, and a lot of the urban legends, I guess, have this where it's that you didn't know what situation you were in until later. There's something about like rediscovering that horror that's even scarier. And they do a lot of that with these urban legends. So I did enjoy that. And I do like the setup too, where she's talking to the guy and, she's saying like, what room are you in or whatever. And then she leaves to kind of get herself ready. And she comes back and it just says, yours. And then like, she's tackled or strangled and whatever. But it's got a good setup. And again, they kind of mix that. The Dangers
of Teen Girls and the Internet, the movie was, I think, suggesting. But then also they're so mean to her even after she's dead, where they're like, better check her pulse. She's looked like that for years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because she's pale.
Yeah, because she's goth. You get it? Yeah. They even say something about like she was depressed, so like it makes sense. You saw all those crazy pills she was taking, like stuff like that. It's pretty wild.
Very 90s.
Yes.
Yes, that's it too. This is this was a blast from the past. Honestly, going back to both of these, just in that specific context. But yeah, so like Natalie, at this point, there's 3 bodies, and Natalie feels like she's like literally going insane. 3 bodies in 3 days. There's Michelle. There's the Joshua Jackson character, who everyone just thinks went away for the weekend as a prank. I was like, it's a great prank. And then obviously, everyone thinks that, the goth girl committed suicide, and that, aren't you glad you didn't turn the lights on was her suicide note. So no one is believing.
Right.
Yeah, no one is believing her serial killer theory. Not even Paul. Again, I guess you can say that Paul was the one who was like suspicious of the urban legend stuff in the first place. But you would think, hey, it's a great story. There's a serial killer on campus, and he was stoked when there was a murder on campus, and he could like write the headline for it and like get the quote from the dean and from the the campus cop played by Loretta Devine from the Broadway show Dreamgirls for some reason. This cast is ridiculous.
I love one of her introductions where she's watching a blaxploitation film and she knows all the words and she's like shooting the gun out and all that. I don't know if she was watching. Was it Pam Grier? Is that like?
She's literally watching Pam Grier.
Yeah.
Is it Jackie Brown that she's watching, or?
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was Foxy Brown or it was Coffee. Yeah. But it was definitely one of those 2 films, and she's so stoked about being like, man, I can't wait till I have my Pam Grier moment, which obviously the movie is setting up because she's going to have it later where she's going to get to shoot the killer. But this movie was so defined by for me by the that moment where she's doing that and she's watching the movie and she's so stoked, imagining herself like reenacting it. And then you get the line right after that of Natalie being like, the urban legend killer, that's what he's doing. Someone that is out there taking all these stories and he's making it reality. And everyone's going, well, what's he going to do next? Put spider eggs in the Bubblicious,
Yeah. I also like when it starts to get into the whole, like, we got to find out the mystery journalism aspect. And, they do the classic, they go to the library to try to find out what year
the
Stanley
Encyclopedia of Urban Legends.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, they do that, and then they also go to find the year of like when that Stanley Hall massacre supposedly happened to find out if it's an urban legend or not. And of course, the year 73 book is missing. Dun dun dun.
Oh my god.
We know
and
that they were
like,
something.
wait. could this have anything to do with the 25th anniversary of the Stanley Hall massacre, of which Robert Englund's professor is the sole living survivor of? And, you know, who teaches these stories for a living and has the parka and the axe hidden behind a secret door in his office? Could it be this guy? Should we investigate him or not? Which, by the way, did you guys read about why the killer has a parka in this? I thought it was so funny.
No,
I
thought it was like a big coat hides the face. It gets the job done, you know? But no, I wasn't.
That's kind of what I thought too. And it reminded me of like the poster from like The Thing or something like that.
Yeah,
so I thought maybe like that's what they were doing. It turns out that this was written as a winter movie and they planned on shooting it in Toronto thinking it was going to be winter, even just all the time, I guess.
Oh man!
So they went to Toronto, and the weather was just. I don't know if they went in like the spring or the summer, but it was just like it was like going to New York. Like, it was just a normal day. Like it's not. You weren't going to the Arctic or something, and so they had to drop the winter aspect from the whole movie because they were like. But at one point, they considered like fake snow and like dressing up all of the extras and all of these like winter gear, but they were like, we can't do it. So, but they were too far along. The killer had already been modeled. All the storyboarding had been modeled with him to look like this. And so they were like,
all right.
So yeah, we have the winter Arctic killer in just like summer Toronto,
which leads to honestly one of the funniest things. Like this had to be a gag because I just lost my mind. When I think it's Brenda and she's swimming. And Natalie is looking over the pool in this like glass container room or whatever.
So good.
And she's swimming, and then all of a sudden you see the killer, supposedly. He's got the big coat on, the hood is on for whatever reason. You can't see the face or anything like that. And she's like, oh, she's gonna get axed or killed in the pool or whatever it is. So she starts to smash the glass with a chair and scream Brenda's name. And then it's revealed at the end that it's just another swimmer wearing the biggest fucking winter coat of all time for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's just another like fake
so
out.
Funny.
And I lost my mind because it's like if you really just start thinking about the context, it makes no sense whatsoever, and it's a blast.
They find like 4 different coats. Like everybody has this same coat, and they like keep finding it in the office, or they'll find it in like.
Which I was like is probably actually true if you came here. Everyone has like a Canada Goose coat, so they were just like, yeah, whatever. Everyone, you know,
yeah, that'll work. Yeah. Even though it's like
the janitor has it in his car,
right?
You know,
it might be 80 degrees outside, but that's fine.
Oh, well, and also, like, you know, obviously at this point too, like Natalie is the only one trying to raise the alarms on this killer, and you know, everyone's going, you're just crazy. That's just a swimmer with a coat on. Like, stop freaking out. And Paul is like the only one who's kind of helping her out because he lives by the motto, reality is lurid and I'm the messenger. I think it is what he says at one point. And so he is getting excited about this kind of like trail of blood that they're following. He gets like suspended off of from the student paper. He wants to get the student Pulitzer, I think he says at one point too, which I was like, go Jared Leto, very, very funny character in this. And who dies next? Is it the dean? Is it the parking garage kill?
Yeah, I think so, because this is when they have the meeting with the dean, and you know, because they found some stuff at Wexler's office, and then I think Jared gets fired from being a writer, and then they reveal
from the student newspaper.
Yeah, and then they reveal this the backstory of Natalie, where she was also playing that headlight game, and she was a part of this accidental killing.
Right, so like everyone is dying, and Natalie is the only person who like knows them all. She's technically the connective tissue between, you know, because no one else knew Michelle, except for her. And then the dean is killed in one of the things that I hate the most. I hate ankle stuff. The idea of someone just slicing my ankles kind of freaks me out a little bit. And maybe that goes back to the urban legend, because that actually is one where like someone's underneath the car and they're gonna, you know, get at your feet or whatever. But man, it's up there with like teeth mutilation for me, which is so like my next worst one.
Yes, the ankle tendon, it's
you just feel the
sharpness, and they keep using it in movies, and it gets me every time.
Yeah, and they drag this along too, like he's, you know, because he can't use his feet anymore, so he's just kind of dragging along the parking garage as the killer gets closer and closer with the car. And I'm surprised that I thought it was just going to turn into like, you know, a kind of gory, you know, run him over kind of gag. And using the actual tire spikes was a pretty added effect, I gotta say. That's pretty gruesome.
Oh, what is it? The shot goes to the sign that says, like, will cause tire damage.
Yeah.
Yes.
So great.
Yeah, like so many great little gags like that. And also, like, in comparing the two films, like going in from that one into this one, I was like, man, these death scenes are just so much more visually imaginative and like more viscerally impactful for me. The one that got me the most and actually like made my jaw drop was the frat party one.
Oh yeah,
that opens
right next,
on this amazing setup image of Rosenbaum making his dog do a beer chug, and also having the dog with like a nose ring on. I was like, this is like the coolest
Which,
fucking
by the
dog
way,
that's ever lived.
it's like a little white terrier.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's
hilarious what dog they actually choose for this frat boy party.
It's such a ridiculous image to start it off. It's like such a like a cartoonish college frat party kind of thing, and also the kids are like blasting like Zoot Suit Riot. I was like, what the fuck is this party? Like there's so many little tiny gags when you kind of like actually investigate this through, and Rosenbaum's eventual death in this scene, which comes after a little bit of like the obligatory teen drama where it's like, you know, like Natalie and Paul are getting closer together due to the investigation that they're doing into this urban legend serial killer. Yeah, and Brenda's jealous about it and upset with Natalie because she told him that, you know, she was obviously attracted to the handsome student journalist who, you know, cares about the world and wants to report on it, and you know, and Parker essentially accuses Jared Leto of like making up this urban legend killer for like attentions and for the headlines for his CV, which obviously kind of pisses him off. So they all like leave the house and leave him alone. And Rosenbaum gets a phone call where he's like saying like, you're about to die. He's like, ooh, is the call coming from inside the house? It's actually like the most Scream-esque death in the whole movie, because like the guy's not taking it seriously. He's like, yeah, and whatever, Mr. Ghostface killer. What's is it Rose McGowan who gets that moment? Like, is this the part where I die?
Yeah.
Like, are you gonna kill me? And he's like, yeah. Doing a little head nod.
That is one of the best moments ever.
Like that's so good. And in that shock moment that hits is so clever when he's like, wrong legend. Yeah, this isn't about the call coming from inside the house. This is the one about the old lady who tries to dry her wet dog in the microwave, which that can't be a real urban legend.
I have never heard of that before, but I was like, no.
I actually have heard of. It's different versions, I think, though, because I can't remember why the old lady ends up putting the dog in the microwave, or I think the version I heard was that she finds her dog in the microwave. It's another one of those, like, you know, some mysterious stranger comes in and kills the dog or whatever. But yeah, so I actually did hear about that one, I think, growing up.
Oh, okay. I did not expect it. It felt like it kind of came out of nowhere because he puts the pieces together. Sure. I was like, oh, dude, my beer chugging dog, where is it? He goes over to the microwave. There's a POV shot from inside the microwave that dollies through the gore of the exploded dog meat all over the fucking microwave, which then goes into these series of shots where he's screaming and freaking out and going to a POV tracking shot of him running into the bathroom so he can vomit in the toilet, and it's a full shot of his head in the fucking toilet and then his head being used with a beer funnel to shove Pop Rocks and like Drano down his throat so that he's like choking on his vomit and foam, and just the spinning overhead shot of his corpse and the use of fades and everything. I was actually kind of blown away by this death.
Yeah,
it's pretty extreme.
And especially to have, it's kind of like it's a double whammy, right? Because they do the dog and then instantly do that death as well. So you do get quite a bit from the frat party thing. And
I've had the microwave on the mind ever since that clip has been going around of Ezra Miller putting a baby in a microwave from The Flash. Have you guys seen this?
No.
Oh yeah, I saw the clip, right? I saw it on Twitter. I have no idea what's happening, but
I
I
will find out months and months from now, but
when it drops
completely
online.
out of context, an image of Ezra Miller putting a baby in a microwave in The Flash that is apparently real, and apparently the footage might have been reversed, and he might have been taking it out of the microwave, but I was also like, why is there a baby in a microwave?
to do that.
That's wild. Okay.
So either way, that was where my brain instantly went when this dog exploded in this microwave as well. So I was like, God damn, this is dark.
I also like the two more dialogue moments in this frat party where the first one is just kind of a gag where it's feeding into the urban legend thing again, where this like nerdy guy comes up to Natalie or Brenda and is just like, they used a real girl that was dying on a 911 call for this part, and that's why it sounds so real. And then he says a couple other things, so he's kind of this like urban legend nerd or like this trivia nerd a little bit, which I just like the gag. And then the other one is cool because they set up a little bit of that red herring with Paul and Parker, which is Rosenbaum and Leto, where Parker is accusing Paul of being the killer because he's like, you could use it for your stories, and he's saying this in front of all of the party so that they start to suspect him and all of that. And they even eventually, probably 10, 15 minutes from now, lean into that a little bit too. It's kind of like they're trying to plant the seed in your brain so that when they do it actually in the film, that you might believe it for a second.
I kind of did because
a fun scene.
I could not remember who the killer was in this, and as you get towards the end, I was like, okay, well, the only options left really are like, oh, maybe it is Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because the way that
because
we'll get to it. Yeah.
Well, because I was gonna say, like, at this point in the movie, because like Tara Reid also dies around this point in the movie too.
Similar to a Scream 2, I think it's Scream 2, where they have that like the background because she's in a sound booth. And they have
she's
killer.
Like the local sex DJ talk show radio host who takes
radio mode.
Takes your personal advice calls.
Yeah, and she's kind of mean-spirited about it a little bit, kind of like the talk radio host, that movie that we covered a little while ago. It's never, it's not quite the same, of course, but she's trying to channel that spirit a little bit. But they do that.
Oh yeah, what was that thing about the frat boy like milkshake or something or protein shake? Because the girl's asking her about what she did, what she does because she like swallowed cum or whatever. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Very vulgar.
It is cool to see. It's not quite, as well done as what Craven would do, of course, but
neither of these guys are Craven, unfortunately.
But it's always a cool idea to kind of have that like sound barrier where you can see the killer actively struggling and killing somebody, but because of like soundproof glass or whatever it is, the other person doesn't notice. I guess they had a kind of similar.
She sees her like assistant or producer like being killed in the mixing room behind her while she's actually in the studio, right?
Yeah. And this,
which leads into a huge like staircase chase with like crane maneuvers.
It's a good chase scene. Like it's very elaborate. There's like a lot of levels in it that I liked a lot.
Yeah. She actually has to like fall completely down one of them at one point. It's actually one of the sets that they used because it's shot at University of Toronto, which is where they also shot a lot of the TV show Hannibal. They actually used one of the same sets that Hannibal eventually used.
I thought it looked so familiar.
Mm-hmm. Well, because University of Toronto has like that like old school architecture to it, so you can tell that like that's what they kind of wanted. They wanted this something that feels like the students are in like a more classical kind of setting, and then they're doing all of these like doing the like sort of like vulgar cartoon slasher thing that they're doing inside of it.
I was a little it was surprising to me that they didn't really show the Tara Reid killing. They do kind of like
they just do the little wave,
and
right?
At first, when I watched that the first time, I was kind of like, well, usually in these movies, if they don't show like the body actually dead or whatever, that's kind of a setup for a possible twist or something like that. And they just never end up showing Tara Reid for some reason. But one I found a little strange, but it's still a good sequence.
Don't see Wexler killed, right? We just see his body.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true.
I was like, I couldn't figure out if that. They did kind of. I was hoping to like see him get killed because I don't know if it was like something that was cut or we just never. Thought that.
They end up using it, I guess, as like because that's when his body is revealed in the trunk. That's when they think that it could have been Paul, because I think they're on the run with it's like Brenda, Natalie, and Paul, and
because they all decide to leave campus, which is like, like that's the move. And they do that they flirt with like that one urban legend where it's like the characters think that they're like smelling gas, but they're smelling something that's stinking, and they pull over and there's like something in the trunk. And they find Professor Wexler in the trunk. And I do like the gag of the two girls like reuniting their like silly little melodrama they were having over the boy, where, Brenda's like, you and Paul are so cute together. Like, you guys belong with one another. And she's like, oh, that's so nice. So nice. Like, thank you. And then when they find the body in the trunk, she's like I said, he's all yours. He's clearly the killer. He's got trunks in his car. And it turns into like a whole like fleeing and, on foot in the forest chase where they're getting separated. I think that's where Natalie gets picked up by
the janitor.
The Canadian actor Julian Richings from Cube, who I wanted to point out. Obviously he's in a lot of Canadian stuff that shoots here, but credited as just weird janitor, which is awesome.
And that's exactly how they write him and play him. Every single time he's in any scene, he's just like kind of creeping in the corner, looking at him with his kind of like weird look that he's got.
He's literally the most hilarious red herring because it's literally just because he looks funny. There's no other
he's just weird
thing
looking.
that's suspicious about
and
him.
He's always just he is always kind of cleaning in the dark, so I don't know.
It is funny. Even when she picks him up, it's kind of just more like his creep factor again. It's the way that they use Julian Richings in this is pretty funny.
But it's great because he's basically saying it's a good bookend to the Brad Dourif character, where it's like this is just someone who's kind of weird and not harmful though.
And your sort of paranoia and fears generated from these stories that have been passed down to you is what's making you act the way that you are in front of them. That if you didn't have that mood that you're bringing to it, then I think the movie actually uses that aspect of the urban legend thing that it is like a lot of characters just being kind of like, we have this creepy story, it's creating this atmosphere where I'm creeped out, and now all of a sudden everything is a fucking urban legend no matter what. Everyone's a killer, everyone has a parka jacket. It is surprising how many they manage to fit in, because they go straight from that one in the car to the one with the high beams and the headlights where the janitor is getting into the car crash with the guy, and then I think they end up, the big final one is they go back to the Stanley Hall one, where she's making her way back to campus, and she can hear Brenda's screams coming from inside Stanley Hall, which is the one sequence that is like really, really like over directed, or like art, like it's almost artificial, where they go inside of it and it's like this huge like dilapidated like run down structure covered in like neon lighting and like lightning storm lights and
all the bodies from the film.
The gothic candlelit room where the corpses start like popping out at her like she's in like a fun house or something like that. That to me really clarified like what this movie has been going for the whole time. Like, this dude is just creating like a slasher fun house that he's having a blast in.
And now it's the ultimate urban legend. They've all come together and they've destroyed an entire campus.
I love Brenda's line when she reveals that she's the killer, because it turns out that it's her friend, and that she was the ex-fiance of the guy that her and Michelle killed when they were high schoolers getting revenge. And her line about like, don't you want to be an urban legend, Nat? All your friends are now. Another, I love how, because she's kind of pulling that like, crazy person Lillard performance from the end of Scream. Like, she's starting to go over. She hams it up.
Yeah, it's great.
They got so lucky that of all the kid casts that they picked the right one.
Bigger.
The volume of her hair really works for this moment.
Fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. I love her line where she's just like, I tried therapy, it didn't work.
It's
So funny. And I also like all the setups, like when she's talking about like how she's going to frame Wexler and all that. But previously, like 10 minutes ago, you see the body and the guy was stabbed like 50 times. And I just think it's very funny that would be her plan if she were to try to get away with it a little bit. But I do like the recontextualization of that scene because, you know, you thought it was Paul putting it in the trunk and you realize when Brenda showed up, she's the one that did it and all of that. So it works in a slightly clever way. And I had fun with that.
And we don't quite get my favorite legend, which is the kidney in the bathtub, but like there's an attempt to do it.
Yeah. And I do like when she starts to just like things are happening to her so much. Like you have the security guard, you have Natalie, Paul starts to come up. And she's getting overwhelmed, so she just starts shooting, and she's just like, I don't need an urban legend anymore. Fuck it, I've done enough of them. So there's a lot of really great tongue-in-cheek moments in this ending that I had fun with.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, the twist is, you know, the movie's been trying to do one of those things where it's written all of these characters to be kind of hilariously suspicious in order to throw you off so that it can get you with the biggest twist possible. And a lot of the time, stuff like this doesn't work because you go back to the movie and you're kind of like, well, why would she have behaved that way in an earlier scene if this is what she was doing? Or, you know, like that kind of deal. So what a twist like this really needs is for the actor to just fucking go hog wild on it and to just like make it like she's not doing anything that makes sense. She's fucking crazy. And Rebecca Gayheart totally just nails this when she's like, I prefer terms like eccentric, you know, maybe I'm a little nutty, you know, and her hair is freaking out and her eyes are going crazy. Like she is doing like, she reminded me of Michelle Pfeiffer in the back half of Batman Returns.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
She just goes like unhinged. She's like, payback's a bitch. You know, she's pulling the guns out. She's like, she is, you know, like she really like nails the transition to this. And because the movie does run out of things at a certain point to do, they're like, we can't get much more ridiculous than this. We're going to have, you know, the cop run in and get her sort of Pam Grier moment where she's going to get switchbladed, but then she's going to, you know, be able to take the shot at her. And yeah, she tries to recreate the black market kidney heist, like legend thing on her, but obviously it doesn't work.
And then they do stuff. I like when Paul comes and tries to.
I was gonna just say Jared Leto's fucking slow clap, dude. What is that?
Hey.
So funny,
useless.
dude.
God.
It's so funny, and he tries to like convince her that he's also kind of intrigued by her urban legend killings or whatever.
Yeah,
and her line,
she's like, "I'll write the story how you want it," you know.
Yeah, and her line back is great, where she's like, "You're cute, Paul, but you're not that fucking cute," and just puts the gun up again, and then she does eeny, meeny, miny, mo to shoot somebody, but luckily because it's just so much fun, this movie, I think it's the security guard's moment where she ends it and she's like, Mo, and then shoots her. It's a pile-on of like hilarious horror finales. It's pretty good.
I'm trying to remember if it's this scene, but I know they do make a Noxzema joke at some point.
That's true too.
Yes, because Rebecca Gayheart was the Noxzema girl. That was like,
that's right,
her thing. I can't remember if it's this scene or earlier, but it's just like, oh my god, they're just having fun.
And then
no, they are well, and because they also shoot her out the window, and you're like, well, that would be, you know, like that makes sense. Like that's like a slasher movie ending or like an action movie ending, I guess you could say. They get shot, she's done. But of course, they also need to have her fly through the windshield of the car as well, because she needs to go through 2 windows. You know, that's not enough. Like this movie really wants to hit you with that, where she tries to repeat the backseat of the car when they're driving away, and they were like, no, this is going to become a legend too, you know, and it'll change person to person. And Jared Leto's like, if this is an urban legend, when do we get to the twist? And then the axe just comes flying out of the back seat.
And what's great too is that they, like, not once but twice, they do that thing that I was talking about earlier where they never show like the dead body. With Tara Reid, it's more just like, I guess, an afterthought kind of thing. But with Brenda's character, it's like you need to see the killer completely die, or we know that that's not entirely going to happen. And sending her through the windshield twice into the river, of course, ends up with another kind of
she's still
setup.
not dead, of course.
There's like 3 endings to this movie. funny.
Oh yeah, it's so funny, and of course it's like reflecting the movie itself. It's kind of the movie's gonna repeat basically over and over and over again because you have
because the college kids are now telling the story of the movie, and everyone's like, oh, that's bullshit, that's an urban legend, blah blah blah. And there's one girl who's like, I actually I believe you, but I heard it like a little bit of a different way, and the camera like pans around to reveal that it's Brenda who's about to start telling the story again. Yeah, I will say I think that ending is better suited to the movie and a bit like it's still ridiculous that she survives that whole thing, but that to me was a stronger ending than the I still know followed by just like the guy popping into the screen.
Oh yeah, because it's more like it's just more nonsensical in the context of the film with I Know What You Did Last Summer, whereas this is like done this craziness the entire time.
They've set this up.
Yeah.
This
They've
is
set
a
this
fitting
kind of
end.
ending up.
Yeah.
It has to end up like a kind of like what an urban legend would, this kind of cliffhanger ending, So
absolutely. Oh yeah. It's just such a fun film. This actually, in the way that like I Know What You Did Last Summer always kind of pulled its punches and wasn't sure what it wanted to be. Like this commits 100% to what it wants to be.
Exactly. And I think that there is an argument to be made, like if we're pivoting towards reductive rating around, this is still going to be in the 3 territory for me, but it is a high 3, I will say. Like I was, for a first time watch, I was surprised at how much I liked this. It is like in terms of concept and in terms of characterization, I don't think I could argue with someone who's like, yeah, this is pretty dumb and pretty tonally inconsistent and pretty silly, ultimately. But the fact that it's doing that with just like the pure glee of someone who like clearly loves these kinds of genre movies and wants to turn it into like just this well-oiled cartoon slasher machine, and all of these actors are such a strange pairing of people who are also pretty committed to it. Like just seeing like, Smallville guy hanging out with like Robert Englund or, having Danielle Harris, having such a cruel, brutal, cartoonishly ridiculous death, and having people deliver, serious lines about urban legends and paranoia. And like the movie just, like 100%, this is the one that knows exactly what it's doing. And, maybe if tongue in cheek or, someone being this kind of ironic or playful isn't for you, maybe it doesn't work. But as far as this kind of movie goes, this guy, I'm going to have to watch more of his stuff. Jamie Blanks. I thought this was just like incredibly, well directed for what it was, and kind of I could see a more annoying version of this movie being made that didn't have set pieces as strong as this one does, because there's a lot of memorable deaths in this, and they aren't even the most graphic. Like I'll say that, like they aren't like they're not Tom Savini, Texas Chainsaw 2 or Friday the 13th Part 4 or something like that.
It's not overly brutal or bloody. It's just it's just more fun.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of colorful and animated, and while still having a bit of that nasty attitude about it, and it's visually clever. Every single major visceral moment in this has some sort of like payoff that they are doing, like whether it is like the security guard who wants to have her Pam Grier moment and gets to have it, or whether it's a dog exploding in a microwave previously being set up as the beer chugging dog, so that you can get that moment on the phone call when he's like, this is the urban legend about the dog in the microwave, like that kind of shit. Like it's just or even having her walking in on the roommate having sex and then later coming in and ignoring the roommate being murdered because she thinks she's having sex. Like that's all stuff that you really need to think about and you really need to bake into the visuals of your film in order to pull it off. So there's thought put into this, and I appreciate that. And yeah, this was a blast, honestly.
Yeah, I'm also gonna give it a 3, which is awesome, and I'm glad that you brought it on, Emma, because I think it was a couple years ago that I watched it, and I don't know if I was in a mood or I just was not reading the film correctly, but it just didn't take to it, and this time I had a lot of fun. So yeah, I think the set pieces are. Yeah, I think the set pieces are great. I do like all of the tongue-in-cheek meta qualities of it. This almost feels like it could have been written by Kevin Williams because it's just. It just has those qualities of Scream. It's satirical than
even I Know What You Did Last Summer is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think what also helps is that Jared Leto and Alicia Witt are both playing this very seriously, but everyone around them is very campy. And I think that seriousness helps sort of off-play the campiness. And so you get that good mix.
Yeah, that's true. There is there's a balance there. You're kind of grounded with those characters and then get to have fun with all the other ones. Whereas with I Know What You Did Last Summer, everyone is taking it equally as seriously, even though it's kind of ridiculous. So, I do think that this has a more self-awareness, which helps the film. And yeah, I agree with you, Josh. I think I'm going to check out some of this guy's stuff just to see what else he has. Silent Number sounds really interesting. I'm going to check that out maybe right after.
Yeah, I'd recommend it. It's on YouTube. It's like 14 minutes long. It's basically like clearly an audition just for the opening set piece of this movie, because it is just like imagine a stormy rain night where there's a girl and she's scared and paranoid and it's how can he keep developing that, and how can he really loves that. I mean, you could even tell in that short film how much he even loved that idea of the babysitting urban legend, or like the girl who sees one thing but you're thinking it might be another thing. Like that moment in his short film when a guy comes banging at her door and she thinks that he's got blood on him, and she doesn't let him in because she's like, what the fuck, this guy is terrifying, he could be a killer. He could be the hook man. And then later on in the call with the cop, when she finds out that it's like, yeah, that guy actually crashed his car into your telephone pole, like that's why he did that, and so it's just but the way that it's how atmospherically directed and sort of like dynamically played up to be incredibly scary it is something this guy clearly loved.
Yeah, and I'd be curious as to see if he does anything more tongue-in-cheek with the idea of like a Valentine's killer. So I definitely have to check that out.
Actually, because I know that one has David Boreanaz, right? I feel like I remember.
Denise Richards. Speaking of Wild Things as well.
Oh yeah. This one looks interesting just because of the premise is it's something that you've definitely heard before, but I'd like to see him tackle it. And it's like 85 minutes, so I imagine it's right to the point. And it's called Storm Warning that he did in 2007. And it's just about a couple that gets, there's like a storm, so they seek shelter in a farmhouse, and then there's just killers. So I love the simplicity of that premise, so I think I'll check that out too. But yeah, 3 out of 5. He also, like you said, he's got some really awesome camera moves too, like specifically that microwave pan from like the perspective of the microwave into Rosenbaum's mouth is really cool and effective, and has a balance again of like kind of this cartoonish quality, but also still kind of horrifying. So yeah, this was a much more balanced film, I felt. So 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it 3 too. I just have fun watching it.
Hell yeah.
Now I'm gonna go drink some Pepsi and Pop Rocks and see if I can recreate the bathroom scene.
Damn.
Yeah, let's see how we do. But that's gonna wrap it up, I think, for this week's episode. That was I Know What You Did Last Summer from 1997, as well as Urban Legend from 1998. Thanks so much, Emma, for joining us and for bringing these films with you. I don't know when we would have got around to these. They weren't like immediately on my radar of ones we had to talk about, but I had fun revisiting. If there's anything that you've got that you want to plug while you're here, even if it's just your Twitter or your books or anything like that, this is normally where we have guests do that.
Yeah, y'all can follow me on Twitter. It's just, E.E. Berquist. And yeah, my books, Devils Unto Dust and Missing Presumed Dead.
Sweet.
Hell yeah. Can definitely recommend them. Go check them out. For our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time where we are going to be doing your patron voted episode, kind of a left turn from 90s teen slashers. We're going to be talking about very, very subjectively directed biopics about controversial authors. We're going to be talking about Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, directed by Paul Schrader, about Yukio Mishima, which is a wild adaptation of both his sort of real life politics as well as his eventual suicide, and depicted through visions of recreations of his life as well as recreations of his actual novels and fiction as well. And obviously an incredible Philip Glass score. We'll get into all that. So and you might be wondering, well, what's the other one? Naked Lunch, directed by David Cronenberg,
Nice.
and obviously doing William S. Burroughs, which takes a very similar approach, where the director is both sort of like doing an adaptation of the artist's work and doing it in the style of their work, but also making it kind of about them and making it autobiographical as well. So this is a very, very cool pairing you guys voted for. So that's going to be over on the Patreon next week for anyone interested. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're wilding out. We're going 90s mode again, but we're doing it with a more sort of like the action element. We're going to be talking about Con Air and Face Off.
Oh my God.
Hell yeah.
I can't wait.
Which is going to be just a ridiculous episode. I mean, anyone who's been a longtime listener of the show knows that, because it's come up so much. Jamie and I, one of our favorite movies of all time is Face Off.
Yes.
And it's definitely my favorite American John Woo film. And might even be just my favorite one. We'll find out on this rewatch. So it's going to be a monster episode as well. So look forward to that in 2 weeks' time with a special guest.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that being said, that wraps it up for everything. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.